Part 30. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 294. At this moment, outside the martial world, three people were flying side by side in the direction of Lianji sect. Tang Sufei was wearing a dark blue dress, with two faint blushes on her beautiful face, her eyes sparkling, as if something great had happened, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but slightly raised. Next to Tang Sufei, there was another monk flying on a sword, the holy son of the world Sea, Gu Hua. His expression was solemn, and there was a bit of surprise in his eyes, as if he was still digesting Tang Sufei's words just now. The original witch is the maid next to Musian, and she has revealed her true identity before, scaring away the national teacher of the Dogon dynasty. Gu Hua frowned, his tone full of shock, and joy. The shock was because of Wei Mengru's identity, and the joy was because the former owner of the World Sea was actually still alive. Before coming to Dongzhou, they had no expectations for the original witch, but they didn't expect that this trip to Dongzhou would yield such a reward. If the elders of the World Sea knew about this, they would probably be so excited that they would personally come to welcome the return of the original witch. Tang Sufei said in a soft and pleasant voice, "At first, I didn't dare to believe it, but everyone in that area saw the scene of the original witch's rebirth, and Sister Lingxian was also there." Not far behind the two, Ye Lingxian was wearing a lavender dress that fluttered in the wind, her hair set off her exquisite and beautiful face, and she exuded the quiet and elegant temperament of a young lady. Gu Hua's eyes flickered slightly, and he said to himself, if Miss Wei is really the original witch, then after this Ascension conference is over, maybe we can ask her to return to the World Sea with us. Tang Sufei shook her head gently and said, Miss Wei may not go back with us. As a woman, Tang Sufei naturally understands women best, but from the scene she saw in the martial world not long ago, Wei Mengru is very likely not to want to leave her young master. If Master Mu doesn't leave, she probably won't leave either, Tang Sufei continued. Gu Hua heard this and said with a smile, Mr. Mu is now an inner disciple in Lianji sect, right? The resources that inner disciples can get every month are limited. If we offer suitable conditions, he will probably consider it carefully. Tang Sufei nodded slightly unconsciously when she heard this. Dongzhou is a rich place with many natural treasures, but Musian is only an inner disciple no matter what. He can indeed get valuable resources and training in Lianji sect, but the resources of inner disciples are limited after all. If they offer enough conditions, he may not be unmoved. If the resources are not enough, most of the female cultivators in the sea of my world are natural beauties. I think Mr. Mu is also a romantic person, so I think he will be moved. Gu Hua smiled again. Then, he smiled and looked at the elegant jade beauty beside him and asked, what do you think of Musian, Saint? He has a good personality and is responsible, but I haven't met him much, so I can't say for sure how he is now, Tang Sufei commented. Then, noticing Gu Hua's teasing look, Tang Sufei sneered, I don't mind, but now go tell Sister Lingxian about your bad idea. Gu Hua smiled awkwardly, it's just a joke, Saint, don't be angry. Tang Sufei gave Gu Hua a contemptuous look, do you really think that Master Mu is a lecherous and dissolute person like you? He actually wanted the Saint of the World Sea to lure Musian with beauty and cheat him to the World Sea? What's in this saint's mind? Master Mu would lower his rank to save a maid next to him. How could such a gentleman be seduced by beauty? Besides, she is more inclined to practice Taoism than to talk about love. Talking about love will only affect her practice. When she thought of this, Tang Sufei's eyes intentionally or unintentionally looked at Ye Lingxian not far behind her. She could see that the forbidden area saint behind her was also interested in Musian, but under such circumstances, her cultivation speed did not slow down much. This talent was really amazing. It stands to reason that once a cultivator has concerns or a Taoist partner, he will naturally be distracted during cultivation, thus reducing the speed of cultivation. However, whether it is Yelingxian or Bairuoxi, their cultivation speed is still amazing. Is it because of some method, or is it that their talent is really so amazing? As if she had noticed Tang Sufei's gaze, Yelingxian smiled and said, "Is there anything wrong, Sister Tang?" Tang Sufei came back to her senses, shook her head and smiled, "I just want to ask Sister Lingxian, after returning to the sect, can you arrange for me and the Holy Son to meet with Master Mu again? We have something to ask him." Seeing this, Gu Hua immediately added, "This matter is of great importance. If it is possible, it will also be of great help to Master Mu's future cultivation." Yelingxian asked calmly, "Can you tell me the reason why you are looking for Brother Mu first?" "Sister Lingxian should know about Miss Wei's matter, right?" Tang Sufei said softly, "The Holy Son and I want to ask her to go back to the World Sea with us later." Yelingxian hesitated and said, "Sister Mengru probably won't agree. She promised to stay by Brother Mu's side." She paused slightly, thought of something, and raised her head and said, "Do you want to take Brother Mu with you?" Gu Hua added, "Miss Ye, please rest assured. If Mr. Mu follows us to the World Sea in the future, the resources he can get will definitely not be less than in the Lianji section. No, it will be much more than the resources he has as an inner disciple now." Yelingxian said lightly, "Oh, you two should figure out a way to deal with this matter. Lingxian can't help much, and Brother Mu won't listen to me." After saying that, she couldn't help but curl her lips. If she could take Brother Mu away with resources, she would have taken Brother Mu back to the restricted area long ago. In terms of resources, it is easy to cultivate a cultivator in the refining god realm with the resources in the restricted area. But Yelingxian knew that even if she asked Muzian to go back to the restricted area with her, and then raise him here from now on, Muzian would probably not agree, at least not for the time being. So Yelingxian never mentioned this matter. Anyway, she is getting along well with Muzian in the sect. Now they actually want to use resources to lure Brother Mu to the World Sea? It's unrealistic. Seeing this, the two looked at each other and could not ask Yelingxian for help. They had to choose to return to Lianji sect first, and discuss the rest with the elders after returning. For Muzian's matter, they hurriedly left the Martial World Assessment only to get the qualification for the Ascension Conference, in order to rush to Lianji sect to inform the elders of this matter as soon as possible. Lianji sect. After Gu Hua and Tang Sufei said goodbye to Yelingxian, they immediately flew to the south bank. The south bank is very vast, with various ancient buildings standing tall, covered with a thick layer of snow. The whole sect is covered in silver. Occasionally, a cultivator flew by on a sword, and when he saw Tang Sufei and the others, he cast a curious look. The saint and son of the World Sea attracted a lot of attention from the first day they came to Lianji section. Many people originally thought that they would be strong competitors for the top 10 in this Martial World Assessment, but they didn't expect that they would return to the sect so early. These people naturally would not have thought that compared to the Martial World Assessment or even the Ascension Conference, the two of them had more important things to do, even related to the future of the World Sea. After entering the villa, the two walked along the quiet and elegant path. Not long after, they saw a beautiful woman with a charming demeanor sitting in front of the pavilion. She was holding a thin book in her hand and reading with relish. At this time, the beautiful woman seemed to have sensed something and looked up. When she saw the saint's son and saint daughter, her eyes suddenly became a little more surprised. "Why did you return to the sect so soon? The Martial World Assessment should not be over yet, right?" "Because there is something important, Gu Hua and I discussed it and decided to return to the sect early to report an important matter to Elder Wen," Tang Sufei said. Elder Wen's name is Wen Qingyun, the daughter of the great elder of the World Sea. In less than 100 years, she has reached the middle level of Return to Void, around the 5th level of Return to Void. This time, it is also to ensure the safety of the saint son and saint daughter that they accompanied them to Dongzhou. Wen Qingyun had great confidence in the two of them for the Ascension Conference, and even thought that they would win the first place in the martial arts assessment, but she never thought that they would come back early. Elder, please rest assured. The Saint and I have both obtained enough points and obtained the qualification to participate in the Ascension Conference. Later Gu Hua seemed to see that the beautiful woman's face was not very good, and immediately added. Wen Qingyun looked at the two of them and said in a gentle voice, "This time we came to Dongzhou for the original witch and the Ascension Conference. The top 10 in the martial arts assessment will have a greater advantage in the subsequent Ascension Conference. Except for the matter of the original witch, anything else is not as important as the Ascension Conference. I think you should all know this." Tang Sufei nodded slightly. "I naturally know what Elder Wen said." Wen Qingyun frowned slightly. "In this case, why did you two leave? Could it be, you have news about the original witch?" "That's what she said, but it's impossible to think about it. In the past 1,000 years, the figure of the World Sea has been all over Kyushu, investigating the matter of the original witch everywhere, and Dongzhou is no exception. But there has been no news about the original witch for so many years. Where can the Saint and the Sun find the news about the original witch? Although they came to Dongzhou to investigate the original witch again this time, they did not hold much hope. We have no news about the original witch." Wen Qingyun was not surprised by Tang Sufei's words. If it was so easy to find the trace of the original witch, the World Sea would not have been so busy all these years. But at this time, Tang Sufei continued, "But I know where the original witch is now." Pa! The book fell to the ground, but Wen Qingyun seemed not to notice it, and stared at Tang Sufei. She was surprised at first, then gradually turned into suspicion, until finally, she suppressed her inner suspicion and excitement, looked up at Tang Sufei, and said, "Do you know where the original witch is now?" "Tianhe Garden." Under Wen Qingyun's gaze, Tang Sufei raised her head and continued, "The original witch is now in Tianhe Garden." At the same time, on the other side. "Are you saying that you were killed by Musian's thunder tribulation, resulting in you failing the martial arts assessment?" In the villa, the elder of Nanhuang stared at the holy son of Nanhuang with a gloomy face and his grey-headed appearance. He was so angry that he scolded Nijiati until he was bloody. Although he was very dissatisfied, he lost if he lost. At this moment, Nijiati could not find a reason to refute, but he felt extremely aggrieved. Would the ghost know that Musian was like crazy and dragged nearly 20 people to death together? He doesn't even care about his falling cultivation. Who can do anything about this kind of person? No one can do anything about the thunder tribulation involving more than 10 people. Nijiati could only answer bravely. On a chair next to the hall, Regina was wearing a charming red dress, her golden hair spread down her back, sitting with her legs crossed, playing with a strand of thin hair, and looking down at Nijiati. "I care more about what you just said than this. You said that during the thunder tribulation, the maid next to Musian used a black mist similar to the secret technique of the southern wilderness to protect Musian, and later scared off the national advisor of the Dacian dynasty. The following events were reported by monks in the martial arts world." "The news may not be true," Nijiati said. "He was blasted to pieces by lightning early in the morning. If it weren't for the protection of the jade slips, he would probably be gone now. Naturally, he doesn't know what happened next. The black mist, that seems to be the secret technique of the southern wilderness." Regina repeated it softly. She couldn't help but narrowed her eyes, tapped her knuckles lightly on the table, and fell into deep thought. The secret technique of the southern wilderness, this is an untold secret belonging to the southern wilderness, but why does a similar black mist appear on Wei Mengru's body? Although she made a deal with Musian, Musian could not pass on the southern wilderness secret technique to others. Wei Mengru's southern wilderness secret technique should not have been passed down by Musian. I have heard in the past that the earliest secret technique in the southern wilderness actually originated from Dongzhou. It was only later that 3 gods discovered one of the secret techniques in a chaotic treasure land and later improved it, which resulted in the weirdness it has today. The elder of Nanhuang frowned slightly and said, could it be that what the maid got is another secret of Nanhuang? At this time, an attendant in black clothes appeared silently in the sight of several people at the entrance of the hall. What's the matter? Regina asked. The Saint Son and Saint Lady of World C just left the south bank and are now heading towards the glazed palace, the attendant said respectfully. Liuli Palace? The eyes of the elders of Nanhuang and Nagiati had a hint of doubt. They all know that the Immortal Ascension Conference is only one of the goals of World C's trip to East Continent, but the real purpose is for the original witch. There has been a lot of movement in the World C over the years, so Nanhuang naturally knows something about it. Logically speaking, the Saint and Son of the World C, who should still be taking the martial arts assessment, went to the Glass Palace in such a hurry? Who are they going to find? For some reason, a person's name appeared in Regina's mind for no reason. I have one more reason to want to get him. Regina suddenly chuckled and stood up from the chair, as if planning to leave. Miss, are you going out? The elder asked. Regina nodded slightly. I have to prepare. What are you preparing for? The elder frowned. Regina turned her head and looked over, smiled sweetly, and said, of course I'm preparing a betrothal gift. After all, we can't let others get there first. Tianhe Garden. While the outside world was surging with undercurrents, at this moment Musian was still in the state of shock and joy. Oh my God, the great white shark in my fish pond is happy +1. Then after the joy, there was also a bit of confusion in my mind. It stands to reason that the person who can open the black box must be someone who has something to do with the original witch and is recognized by her. Currently, there are only 3 people who are known to be able to open the black box, one is Musian and the other it's Wei Mengru, and there's another one, the original witch next to her. Who can put the paper crane into the black box without anyone noticing? Also, when did the other party store the paper crane in the black box? The original witch also had a bit of confusion in her eyes, and whispered to herself, it stands to reason that the only people who can open this black box are me and the people recognized by me. Someone actually put a paper crane and a peach blossom put it here. Besides Sister Mengru and I, is there anyone else who can open this black box? For example, the other party used some secret technique to open the black box, Musian asked. The original witch slowly shook her head. If the other party uses secret techniques to forcefully open the black box, the cave in the black box will be destroyed, and it will not be as intact as it is now. She paused and continued, but, your maid and I are both one of the obsessions of the original witch. Maybe the one who stores this paper crane is another obsession. Musian heard the sharp words, raised his head and said, there are 3 obsessions in total. If this is the case, it can explain why the original witch in front of me does not know about the paper crane. Because the person who placed the paper cranes and peach blossoms in the black box may also be the original witch, but it is not the original witch in front of me. However, the methods of this original witch are a bit too exaggerated. Not only is she proficient in the art of shielding the secrets of heaven, she can even rewrite time, let life come back, and even differentiate into 3 obsessions. There seems to be a special black mist in the ornament on Sister Mengru's chest. Do you know what it is? Musian asked. The bronze ornament contains a secret technique to block the secrets of heaven, and the secret technique of the southern wilderness is one of them. The original witch told the truth. Musian was slightly surprised. No wonder the 2 black mists are so similar. It turns out that they are derived from the same secret technique to block the secrets of heaven. So, has the original witch been to the southern wilderness in the past? Who is this original witch? She is proficient in too many things. Musian looked at the original witch next to him, who was wearing a black hood but could not hide her graceful figure, and his heart was full of emotion. At this time, the formation of the villa slightly rippled, which also attracted Musian's attention. He looked up and raised his eyebrows, and whispered to himself in a playful manner, is it so soon? Is it someone who came to find you, the original witch asked. Musian shook his head gently and smiled, I'm just a gift. You are the one they really want to see. The original witch hugged Musian's arm tightly and whispered, I just want to stay here now and don't want to go anywhere. After that, she leaned her head slightly on Musian's shoulder, looking like an ordinary girl. If I say if you don't go, I'll go at this time, will she lock me in a small dark room on the spot? Musian looked at the beautiful face under the black hood of the original witch and complained silently in his heart. However, considering the disparity in strength between the two sides, he finally held back this idea and didn't want to take such a big risk. Although he didn't remember what happened between him and the original witch in the past, it didn't prevent him from liking the original witch. First, he could really feel the other party's love, and secondly, she was really beautiful. After all, the original witch herself was Waymengru, and there was nothing wrong with liking her own maid. I don't know if it was Musian's idea that worked or what, he clearly felt that the fragrance of the beauty beside him seemed to have quietly changed, and the softness of the chest that his arm just felt seemed to be different from the original witch just now. Musian turned his head slightly to look, and the original witch beside him had returned to Waymengru's original posture without knowing when. Waymengru slowly opened her eyes, noticed Musian's burning eyes, and realized that her hands were still tightly around his arms. A hint of shame flashed across her eyes, and she quickly let go of her hands. Musian didn't mind at all, and asked with a smile, has she gone back? Waymengru nodded gently, her obsession is already very weak, and she can't keep this body for too long, otherwise there will be a risk of disappearing in the future. Musian's eyes moved slightly, and asked, what will happen after the obsession disappears? It will probably disappear completely. The shame in her heart just now has gradually dissipated. Waymengru looked at Musian with complicated eyes and whispered, but even so, she wants to see you. Is your obsession different from hers? Musian suddenly asked. If Waymengru and the obsession just now are both the original witch, does it mean that Waymengru will disappear sooner or later? Waymengru shook her head and said, if you have to define it, I am not an obsession, and I am the leader of the original witch, so I will not disappear. But her words. Although Waymengru did not continue to say it, Musian already knew the answer. Even if it is hosted in Waymengru's body, the obsession of the original witch will disappear sooner or later. An obsession that has loved him from the past to the present will sooner or later disappear in this world. Knowing this, she still wants to come out and see him. Although Musian cannot understand this feeling, she still feels a little melancholy. Is there any way to help her? Musian asked. Waymengru shook her head and said softly, obsession is different from spiritual consciousness. It cannot be nurtured, so. Musian was silent for a while, and said, in the past, Yao Meng's only remaining spiritual consciousness was about to disappear, and she was able to save it. I don't believe she can't. So far, he has never seen his Tiansheng furnace fail. This thing can even refine imperial-level medicinal materials quickly. In the past, it has spared no effort to nurture Yao Meng's spiritual consciousness, so that after Yao Meng Fairy reshaped her immortal body, she still missed the spiritual energy of Tiansheng furnace, and she would squeeze Musian's Tiansheng furnace into nothingness every once in a while. In general, Tiansheng furnace is a very good furnace, except that it always snatches Musian's opportunities. Since Yao Meng's spiritual consciousness can be nurtured, the obsession of the original witch should also be able to be nurtured, but there is no way to do it, at least that's what Musian thinks now. Next time she comes out, try to let her enter my natural furnace, Musian said. Waymengru shook her head and said, no, if her obsession leaves my body directly, it will disappear immediately. Unless. Waymengru suddenly lost her voice while speaking. Unless what? Musian looked at her. The maid buried her head and looked at her full and upright chest. There were two blushes on her snow-white and flawless cold face, which made her look more charming and less cold and arrogant. After hesitating for a long time, she suddenly said, "It's okay, isn't there a guest? Don't you want to go and see?" Sister Mengru's reaction is a bit worrying. Musian took a meaningful look at Wei Mengru's beautiful blushing face, then retracted his gaze and looked up at the outside of Tianhe Garden. "That's right, since there are guests here, we naturally can't neglect them." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 295. The original witch had been to the southern wilds and the world sea in the past. She left a great secret in the southern wilds, and later unified the world sea, and was worshipped as a goddess by the monks there. In fact, whether in the southern wilds or the world sea, most monks are familiar with the name of the original witch, but many monks in the southern wilds do not know that the so-called southern wilds secret technique is actually the secret technique left by the original witch. But regardless of whether there is the original witch, Regina originally wanted to invite Musian to the southern wilds for further study for a period of time. Now that she knows that the people in the world sea have left first, she naturally refuses to agree. Musian walked out of Tianhe Garden and really saw the saint from the southern wilds and Tang Sufei. "Why are the three of you so coincidentally here today? Is there something going on?" Musian looked at the three people, and his eyes involuntarily stayed on Regina's sexy figure for a second, and then quietly moved away. Although this woman looks weak, her dress is quite sexy and charming. This huge contrast can attract men's attention the most. But as an outstanding fish pond owner, Musian has a very high self-cultivation and will not stare at another beauty for too long in front of one beauty. So, his eyes soon fell on the saint of the world sea again, and smiled, "Miss Tang, thank you for your help in the martial world before. If it weren't for you, my maid might not have been able to hold on until I arrived." When he said this, there was a bit more sincere gratitude in his tone. So far, he has a good impression of the two geniuses of the world sea. At least they are much more cultivated than some so-called descendants of ancient families, and they are not so arrogant as to raise their chins and look down on people with their noses. Tang Sufei smiled and said, "I didn't help much." In the end, Master Mu arrived in time. Regina looked at the two of them talking and laughing, and her eyebrows could not help but slightly raised. She smiled and said, "It's a pity that Master Mu and I are not in the same area, otherwise I could have helped in time." Regina's tone was extremely sincere, and she seemed to feel regret from the bottom of her heart. In fact, it was true. Regina's original plan was to give Musian some help in the martial world to help him pass the martial world assessment. After all, Musian is now a fourth-grade soul refiner. He is not a very strong person among the geniuses in the martial world, and there will always be times when he encounters trouble. At this time, she helped, which naturally attracted Musian's attention and gratitude. It's just a pity that she didn't see Musian from beginning to end. Instead, she left the assessment site in advance after hearing that Musian had left the martial world. For a genius like the Saint of the Southern Wilderness, it doesn't matter whether she is in the top 10 of the martial world assessment. At most, she will participate in a few more games and treat it as a way to hone herself. Tang Sufei smiled and said, "It's just a coincidence this time. Although Miss Regina is not here, the Saint of Southern Wilderness has some friction with Master Mu." The underlying meaning of her words is to tell Musian, the people from Southern Wilderness are not kind, don't trust them too much. Although the two were in a cooperative relationship before, anyone with a discerning eye can see that Regina obviously has some ideas about Musian. In terms of winning over Musian, they are now competitors. Regina smiled lightly and said, "Although Nigeti and I are both from Southern Wilderness, I have no contact with him. When Nigeti came to the tea house to find me in the past, I also told him about this matter, and Master Mu was also there at that time." When she said this, her eyes gazed at Musian. Musian knew the other party's statement and said with a smile, "Don't stand at the door, come in and sit down first." After inviting the three people into Tianhe Garden, Musian chatted with them for a while, and seemed to be quite harmonious, but he pretended not to hear the invitation raised by the other party intentionally or unintentionally, and changed the topic lightly. When the topic was about to end, Tang Sufei sincerely invited again, "Mr. Mu, I have discussed this matter with the elders. If you are willing to come to the World Sea after the Ascension Conference, you will get much more cultivation resources than now." Gu Hua said with a bit of joking nature, "There are many talented people in my World Sea, and the female cultivators are even more outstanding. Maybe Mr. Mu will find his other half here." It is said that there are indeed more beauties near the sea. Musian's heart moved slightly, but on the surface he smiled reservedly and helplessly. "I know, I will consider it later." Looking a little embarrassed, Tang Sufei glanced at Gu Hua, and her eyes seemed to say, "You see? Others are not the same kind of people as you." Gu Hua was speechless for a moment. He couldn't do it? What on earth was the saint thinking? If this Musian was really a pure and beautiful boy, how could he be close to another beautiful woman when he had an ambiguous relationship with Sister Lingxian? It seems that the other party is also a playboy like him. He is really good at pretending. Gu Hua smiled and said in a voice transmission, "Mr. Mu, this is a bit unkind. We sincerely invite you to the World Sea. Is the beautiful female cultivator real?" Musian took a sip of tea calmly and asked in a voice transmission. "Sure enough, I knew it." Gu Hua shouted in his heart, wishing to publish Musian's voice transmission, and said in a voice transmission, "Of course it is true, but Mr. Mu is really pretending. He obviously has many confidants around him, but now he still looks like a pure and beautiful boy. Sister Lingxian is just my sister, and senior sister is just my senior sister." Brother Gu Hua misunderstood. Musian shook his head and transmitted his voice. "So it seems that there is no problem for me to pursue Miss Ye in the future." Gu Hua transmitted his voice with a somewhat provocative tone. "She doesn't like those in the same realm, and those who are higher than her are too old, so you have no chance." Musian responded lightly, while chatting and laughing with Regina and Tang Sufei. The son of the World Sea stopped talking. Although they really need Musian, to be precise, they really need the maid next to Musian to return to the World Sea, but the other party's confident tone still makes him a little dissatisfied. As the son of the World Sea, what kind of girls has he not come into contact with? He has never seen a beauty who can refuse him. Well, Ye Lingxian is indeed one of them. After chatting for a while, Regina and the Saint of the World Sea stood up and planned to say goodbye to Musian. Originally, Regina wanted to prepare some betrothal gifts for Musian, but now in front of other forces, it is naturally difficult to take these things out. Moreover, if the World Sea intervenes, she must be more fully prepared. "Mr. Mu, I hope you can think about it again. If you come to the southern wilderness, I will never treat you badly," Regina said to Musian with a soft and pleasant voice, and her tone was extremely sincere. Musian nodded slightly, smiled and said, "Don't worry, Miss Regina, I will consider it." On the other side, Tang Sufei's eyes fell on Wei Mengru, who had been sitting silently under the court. "Miss Wei, I have no ill will with the saint, and there is a great inheritance in the Temple of the World Sea, which was left by the original witch. Maybe you can find more memories there. I still hope that Miss Wei can consider it carefully," she said in a sincere tone. Wei Mengru said softly, but her expression did not change much. Just as Tang Sufei guessed, as long as Musian did not go to the World Sea, she would not be able to leave on her own. For Wei Mengru, inheritance is far less important than protecting her own young master. Seeing this, Gu Hua also shook his head helplessly. This master and servant is really strange. Wei Mengru obviously hates her master on the surface, but when making a decision, she considers Musian first. The way they get along is really confusing. Fortunately, this maid has not fallen into Musian's clutches so far, which makes Gu Hua feel a little better. At least there are still people who see the true face of Musian's half-heartedness and have not been deceived by him. It should be said that he is worthy of being the former master of their world C. Even if the memory has not been fully awakened, it is not something that Musian can deceive. In the final analysis, if the original witch was really taken down by Musian, and she was so obsessed with Musian that she stayed in Dongzhou and refused to leave, I'm afraid those old monsters in the world C would go crazy. Dongzhou was already a rich and powerful place. If such a being as the original witch was still obsessed with a cultivator from Dongzhou, once this news reached the world C, countless cultivators would break their defenses and would eat Musian alive. Fortunately, Miss Wei was a very smart person, and she had been with Musian for many years in the past, and she also saw through his nature. This was also one of the few psychological comforts in Gu Hua's heart. On the other side, Musian looked at the figures of the three people leaving, but there was a little more thoughtfulness in his eyes. He turned his head to look at the yellow-skirted maid who had walked to his side at some point, and said, "Sister Mengru, what do you think?" At this time, Wei Mengru was wearing a yellow skirt embroidered with beautiful patterns, and a white jacket on the outside. The long skirt fluttered, as cold and gorgeous as frost and snow. Her expression did not change much, she just said lightly, "It's up to you to decide. I'm just a maid and I don't have the power to choose actively." Musian held her slightly cold and soft little hand tightly and said softly, "But I want to respect your decision." Wei Mengru glanced at the warm palm, and rarely did not push his hand away, but her eyes flickered slightly, and she turned away lightly, saying, "I don't care." For her, it's the same everywhere, anyway, the purpose is to protect her own young master, this will not change. So just now when Bairuoxi asked her if she liked Musian, Wei Mengru's answer was not like or dislike, but that she was just a maid. "You go and grab your Musian, it has nothing to do with me anyway, I am his personal maid, please do as you please." Wei Mengru has this attitude. Musian showed a thoughtful look, while playing with Wei Mengru's little hand, thinking about the choice between Nanhuang and the World Sea. He was quite concerned about what Tang Sufei said just now about the inheritance of the World Sea, but the secret technique of the southern wilderness was to shield the secrets of heaven, which also involved the original witch. These two places would naturally have to be visited sometime in the future. At this time, Wei Mengru calmly pulled out her little hand and moved away from Musian's warm palm. Then, she said in a flat tone, "Ruoxi seems to have something to tell you, waiting for you in the room now, go and see." Musian didn't think much about it, and nodded slightly, "Then I'll go and see now." Thinking about it carefully, what happened in the martial world should also make Bairuoxi worried. She was a girl with no bad intentions, gentle and a little fragile. Last night, he guided the energy of heaven to Wei Mengru and didn't return all night, which inevitably made Bairuoxi worried. "And it has been a long time since I felt the warmth of Naxi's heart." Musian's mind moved slightly, and after bidding farewell to Wei Mengru, he strode towards Bairuoxi's room. Wei Mengru stood under the pavilion, looking at Musian with complicated eyes, with a rare apology and pity in her eyes. Arriving in front of Bairuoxi's boudoir, Musian knocked on the door gently, and then gently opened the door. There was a charcoal fire burning in the room, which seemed particularly warm. Beside the charcoal fire, Musian saw Bairuoxi sitting on the soft couch with one leg, wearing a gorgeous white dress, elegant and cold, and exuding the temperament of a weak young lady who lives in seclusion. She raised her head and looked over, her autumn water eyes flashing with gentle luster, and she said softly, "Mu Lang, you are here." After not seeing each other for a long time, Ruoxi seemed to be much more beautiful, and she also put on some light makeup. Musian's eyes lit up slightly, and he closed the door and said, "Sorry, I made you worry." Bairuoxi was very gentle and considerate, shook her head, raised her eyes and said softly, "Sister Mengru and Mu Lang have known each other for much longer than us, it is natural that Mu Lang cares about her so much. Even if Mulang is fascinated by Sister Mengru one day, I think it is normal. Muzian felt warm in his heart, walked to the soft couch and sat down, put his arm around Byruoxi's plump waist, smelled the fragrance of the beauty, leaned forward slightly, and whispered softly in her ear. You think too much, Ruoxi. If you say fascinated, then I have been fascinated by you a long time ago, and it is impossible to be fascinated by others. Malang. Byruoxi whispered softly, raising her soft eyes with moisture. Muzian could no longer bear it, lowered his head and kissed her lips, and then pressed her shoulders with one hand, letting her lean on the soft couch behind her. When the atmosphere was in full swing, Byruoxi suddenly put her slender hand on Muzian's chest, opened her misty eyes, and said softly, Mulang, wait a minute. What are you waiting for? Muzian wanted to suppress the beautiful lady by in one go, but at this moment, she continued to say, let's try another way. I happened to learn a very interesting new method from someone recently. Muzian's eyes moved slightly, and he was interested. What method? Byruoxi gently pushed Muzian away, and then took out the heart lock, saying, maybe Mulang needs to cooperate with me. For Miss Bai, who had no bad intentions, Muzian was naturally not very alert and let the heart lock fall on his wrist. Then, he saw Byruoxi groping for something in the ring, and this scene also made Muzian's eyes more expectant and a little confused. Logically speaking, Byruoxi should have just returned from the martial world not long ago, and the girls around him are all quite pure. Did Ruoxi learn a new way of playing from someone? Under Muzian's expectant gaze, Byruoxi took out a pair of white and black stockings from his sleeves. For a moment, Muzian's thoughts were interrupted. Soon, he came back to his senses, and his eyes slowly solidified on the stockings in Byruoxi's hand. At this moment, Muzian's eyelids twitched wildly, and the alarm in his mind sounded wildly. I borrowed this from Sister Menro. The beautiful Bai, who had no bad intentions, seemed to be fine. Her slightly cool fingers gently stroked Muzian's face, tilted her head slightly, and said softly, you haven't washed it yet. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 296. If it were before, Muzian would probably be frightened when he saw this scene, but at this moment, he remained calm and even looked at Byruoxi with a smile. There was a calm expression on his face, but underneath this calmness, there seemed to be a little bit of helplessness, as well as the tenderness when he looked at Byruoxi. It fully demonstrates the beautiful image of an affectionate young man. Mulang, don't you have anything to say? Byruoxi looked at Muzian tenderly. She thought that Muzian would be surprised, panicked, and even apologize when she saw this pair of stockings that represented evidence, but Muzian's helpless smile at this moment was beyond her expectation. Since Ruoxi knows, I have nothing to say, so let's leave it at that. Muzian sighed softly. What does Mulang mean by this? Byruoxi raised her eyebrows slightly. Muzian's reaction now is as if she is the one making trouble, but this should obviously be Muzian's problem. Ruoxi, you should know that I refine the black heavenly energy, right? Muzian lowered his eyes and looked at the concentric lock on his wrist. Byruoxi remained silent and continued to listen to what he said. The energy of heaven was originally suppressed by me in the natural furnace. Only after a little spiritual energy overflowed could it be guided out of my body. Byruoxi frowned slightly and said, then can't you solve it yourself? Muzian sighed softly, if possible, I would like to, but the situation was urgent at the time. Rather than solving it by ourselves, it would naturally be faster to seek help from Sister Mengru. We have to be reasonable, right? Just imagine, there is a cold maid next to you, and she has confessed her love to you before. In that case, it would be better to ask Wei Mengru to help him with her little hands or wearing black and white silk stockings, rather than enlightening her on her own. Mujian paused, shook his head and smiled bitterly, but yes, no matter how I explain it, it is indeed my problem this time. Ruoxi can do whatever he wants. I just hope you can understand one thing. Under Bai Ruoxi's puzzled gaze, Muzian said affectionately, "You are my Taoist companion, and you are also the first girl I love deeply. This will never change no matter what. No matter if you hit me, you still scold me, as long as it makes you feel better, it's up to you." Although she wanted to be cruel, Bai Ruoxi still felt inexplicably soft in her heart when she looked at Muzian's sincere eyes. Her soft and gentle peach blossom eyes were moist, and her elegant and charming face was slightly shy. She turned away her eyes and said softly, "Malang is always like this, how can I punish you like this?" There was no response from the concentric lock in Muzian's hand, which also meant that every word he just said was sincere. It was precisely because of knowing Muzian's heart that Bai Ruoxi softened her heart at this moment. She raised her head and whispered, "Who is Mu Lang's favorite person?" Muzian stared at the beauty in front of him and was about to speak, but he saw Bai Ruoxi taking out a pair of black stockings and said softly, "Sister Mengru was wearing the gift you gave her to help you." Just seeing the stockings in Bai Ruoxi's hand, Muzian couldn't help but feel excited, and he couldn't help but think of the graceful figure of the cold maid. She deliberately wanted Tang Xinchuo to react so that she could punish me ruthlessly. Muzian immediately realized what Bai Ruoxi was thinking. Muzian lowered his head slightly and buried his face in Bai Ruoxi's arms. Mu Lang, Miss Bai never thought that Muzian would suddenly attack her, so that her hands hung behind Muzian's head helplessly for a moment, and she could not hug her. No. After fully feeling the warmth of Naoxi's heart, Muzian put himself in her arms and said in a firm tone, "My favorite is naturally Ruoxi. With this human heart, this beautiful gentle land, and the faint fragrance on her body, what reason can there be to not like Bai Ruoxi at this moment?" Bai Ruoxi glanced at Tang Xinchuo, but still had no reaction. A sweetness suddenly rose in her heart, and her eyes gradually gained a bit of sparkling luster. It seemed like it was done. Muzian breathed a sigh of relief. The concentric lock on his wrist shook slightly, as if protesting his dissatisfaction. This concentric lock was clearly arranged by Muzian. A relieved smile appeared on Muzian's face. He was not surprised by the result. He took advantage of the victory and said, "Ruoxi, the martial arts assessment will end in 2 days. After that, the competition in the Immortal Ascension Conference will begin. There is not much time for you and me to chat like tonight, so we should cherish the time. Why not first unlock my concentric lock?" "No way." However, before he finished speaking, Bai Ruoxi's soft and melodious voice gently sounded in Muzian's ears. She gently stroked the back of Muzian's head with one hand, lowered her head and stared at the boy in her arms with gentle eyes, feeling Muzian's gentle breathing coming from her breasts, and said softly, "Although Mu Lang said a lot, I also understand that you were in an emergency situation and needed to channel the energy of heaven as soon as possible." Her voice changed, "However, if you do it, you will do it? Even if it is Sister Mengru, I will still be jealous. I understand the truth, but please let go quickly." Muzian tried to break away from Bai Ruoxi with both hands, but she held her tightly and fully felt what facial cleanser was. Muzian's breathing became faster and faster, but Bai Ruoxi seemed to be unaware of what happened. Her soft and pleasant voice continued to sound in the room, "Just take this opportunity to trouble Malang to tell me all the details of last night." She raised her slender fingers and gently combed Muzian's soft hair, and a gentle and seductive arc was drawn at the corner of her lips. "Maybe, I can help you too." The snow-white palace skirt seemed to be stained with some black lines, and a strand of fine hair fell on the snow-white and attractive shoulders, which was breathtakingly beautiful. In the second half of the night, Muzian sat in the study, looking at the personal interface in front of him. His eyes were dull, thinking about life. After a while, he subconsciously touched his waist, and then silently took out 2 essence pills from the ring and fed them into his mouth. It was fortunate that he chose the way to strengthen his physical fitness in the refining realm, otherwise who could withstand it several times a day? He opened his personal interface and took a long-lost look at his current title. In addition to the titles he had seen in the past, he saw the word system holder in the title. To this day, he still doesn't know who got the system. What is certain is that it is definitely the girl next to him, but who it is still unknown. On the title that was originally covered by the pink love frame, 5 dazzling words flashed: the heroine of destiny. In fact, compared to the heroine, I still hope to be the hero, Musian sighed in his heart. At this time, a sneer suddenly came from behind, as if gloating. Musian glanced at the maid beside him and said, "Ruoxi knew about that. Did you tell her?" Wei Mengru silently glanced at the personal interface in front of her young master, and the 5 big words "the heroine of destiny" written on it. She pursed her red lips and said seriously, "I didn't tell her, but she asked me. She happened to see what happened in the room at that time." Wei Mengru continued. "So you sold your young master? What about the promise to protect the young master until death?" Musian was heartbroken, but his eyes couldn't help but glance at Wei Mengru. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian and said, "We are sorry for what happened to Ruoxi. If I keep it a secret from her, I will not be able to get over it." After she finished speaking, she saw Musian looking at her in silence, with a bit of discomfort on her cold and pretty face. She said, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help but tell her the truth under the circumstances." The study room fell into silence again, and only the sound of wind and snow outside could be heard vaguely. After a while, Musian broke the silence, looked at Wei Mengru, and said, "Sister Mengru, I suddenly found that you are also beautiful without stockings." Wei Mengru. After a short silence, Wei Mengru looked down at Musian, with a flawless face like ice and snow, a head of hair scattered on her slender waist, a yellow skirt wrapped around her graceful and sexy figure, a pair of slender jade-like smooth legs exposed to the air, stepping on a pair of snow-white short boots, giving people a sense of aloofness that is difficult to approach at first glance. It is hard to imagine that Wei Mengru had used such beautiful legs to help him guide his spiritual energy before. Musian felt a little emotional. Sensing Musian's sincere admiration, Wei Mengru put her feet on the chair. Her bright and beautiful eyes were filled with contempt, and she said, "Why, do you still want to lick it?" Musian smiled and said, "I'll try it next time if I have a chance. If Sister Mengru doesn't mind." Wei Mengru seemed to look away uncomfortably and said coldly, "Then I'm afraid I will despise you as my master for the rest of my life." "I don't mind." Musian smiled. For Musian, the contempt of the maid is one of the great pleasures of his life. "Will there be any discomfort after refining the chi of heaven?" Musian changed the subject. Wei Mengru shook her head gently, "It seems to have merged with me, and I don't feel anything. And, I seem to be able to temporarily pause time now." Smash Verido. Musian was surprised and said, "How long?" 3 seconds. Wei Mengru said. "If you are promoted to return to void, you should be able to continue to improve at this time." So, is this the battle type heavenly chi? Musian thought. Then he frowned and said to himself, "If I remember correctly, the queen of the demon realm should be collecting heavenly chi, but she has never made a move on you and me, which is a bit strange." Wei Mengru heard this, and there was also a bit of thoughtfulness in her eyes. Then she looked at Musian twice more strangely. "Do you know her? She helped you in the martial realm at that time, right? Because you know each other." "I don't have such a big face." Musian shook his head and smiled. "Didn't she say it at the time? She was just entrusted by someone." Wei Mengru obviously didn't believe it. Who can make the queen of the demon realm by face? Of course there is no one who sells face simply, so there should be some transactions. Musian smiled. Except for Muzian, who can occasionally order Yao Meng and Bai Ruoxi to change positions in bed, no one in this world can order a Hedeo realm to do things, no one is an exception. To make the queen of the demon realm come all the way to Dongzhou, there must be something in Dongzhou that she cares about. Muzian raised his hand and closed the personal interface, looking at the heavy snow outside the window at night and the quiet courtyard. From the stories of the demon realm in the past and things related to Dongzhou, the queen of the demon realm may have another thing that she cares about more than the spirit of heaven. The last time she came to the Yaokai Holy Land was also for this matter. Wei Mengru had some thoughts in her eyes, recalling what Muzian had just said, trying to unravel these clues and integrate them together. Then, as if she realized something, she looked up and said, "The first generation of the Demon King." Boom! At this time, there was a faint dust falling from the ceiling, accompanied by a thunderous roar from the Lianji sect. The disciples in the sect left the cave one after another. They flew on swords, their eyes were panicked, and they were looking for the source of the sound everywhere. Where did this sound come from? Enemy attack. But this is Lianji sect. That breath just now was at least at the return to Void Realm. Could it be that there is some monster sealed in Lianji sect? The sect was full of disciples' discussions. For a while, more and more disciples gathered outside the section because the disciples in the glazed hall were still in the martial realm to participate in the martial realm assessment. Only Tianhe Garden in the huge glazed hall was still lit with candles. Soon, many cultivators realized that something in the pilgrimage hall seemed to be about to give it a try. It was trying to break free from the 1,000-year seal. Then, a gloomy voice resounded in the sect. "Shang Yanfei, I give you half an hour. Either you can unlock the seal for me, or you disciples will be buried with me." A piercing phoenix cry resounded above the pilgrimage hall, and then a phoenix burning with black flames appeared in the air above the pilgrimage hall. The first generation of Demon King. Wei Mengru glanced at Muzian, who was calm and composed, and said calmly, "It seems that the demon cultivators in the pilgrimage hall can no longer bear it. Don't you plan to go out for refuge? Or are you scared to death?" Muzian was calm and smiled calmly. "Sister Sect Master is here, the puppet made by Sister Lingxian is here, the Queen of the Demon Realm is here, and the Palace Master in Ruoxi's body may also be awakened. In addition, there is Fairy Yao Meng and the forces behind the Zhu cultivators who are taking the assessment." Muzian paused and continued, "There is probably no safer place in the world than the Lianji sect now. We just need to sit here, enjoy the snow scenery, and watch this good show unfold." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 297. Muzian sat in front of the study room, looking at the snowy night outside, while Wei Mengru stood quietly not far from him, keeping quiet. The ground shook slightly from time to time, and the huge study room was only occupied by the master and the servant, which seemed particularly quiet. The first generation Demon King chose this time a little bit delicately. Did he not know that the Ascension Conference was taking place outside, or did he have to fight to the death at this time? Wei Mengru spoke softly, breaking the silence. "Now is the Ascension Conference, all major forces have gathered here, and those great powers are also secretly watching the Ascension Conference. It was crazy for the first generation Demon King to take action at this time, unless he was sure that he could deal with more than 3 great powers of the Hedeo at the same time." Muzian shook his head and smiled. How could a Demon King who could unify the demon world be a fool? Although it is not clear why he would make a move at this time, he was either sure or had no choice but to choose this time. "I prefer the latter. But in this case, he can be said to have lost the whole game," Muzian continued. When he said this, his eyes could not help but look in the direction of Lianji Peak, and his mind thought of the sister of the clan leader who was wearing a black dress and outlining her graceful and elegant curves. Shang Yanfei, from the past to the present, has never made a move, and she has only planned everything behind the scenes. Whenever Muzian thought he had seen through her purpose, he would find that the other party's plan was linked together, including the current first-generation Demon King. The more Musian thought about it, the more he felt that the sister of the clan leader was a bit deep. In fact, he thought it was stupid for Shang Yanfei to agree to the bet between the western regions and the southern wilderness at the beginning, because it stands to reason that no one is sure to win the Ascension Conference. But after Lan Murian participated in the competition, Musian knew that he was basically a sure winner in this Ascension Conference. And now it seems. Behind this bet, there are more than just 3 imperial-level medicinal herbs involved. She brought other powerful people in the Hedeo realm into this muddy water. Musian whispered to himself. Not only the few Hedeo realms in Dongzhou, but most of the proud sons of heaven in Zhuz who are in Lianji section. Once a battle breaks out, the power of Hedeo will inevitably affect those young proud sons of heaven. Whether it is the western region or the southern wilderness or even other forces, it is impossible for them to sit idly by and watch the geniuses on their side. They don't need to take action to solve the first generation of demon emperors, but they must protect Lianji sect to avoid hurting their own people. This woman's deduction ability is a bit too terrifying. If I really stay with her in the future, I'm afraid it will be arranged clearly. Musian sat on the chair and looked at the heavy snow outside the window at night, sighing from the bottom of his heart. This time, for the 3 imperial-level medicinal herbs, all the people sent by various continents were their own peerless geniuses. It is impossible for the powerful beings in the Hedeo realm to leave them alone. First, it would be disheartening. Second, the first generation of the Demon King is now a candle in the wind. Even if he burns his essence, he can only return to the Deo in a short time. But one Hedeo, it is impossible to fight more than 2 Hedeo powerful beings. Moreover, there are far more than 2 Hedeo powerful beings in the Lianji sect now. But now, compared to this, I am more concerned about why the first generation of the Demon King chose to break the seal at this delicate time. Musian stood up and stretched his waist, glanced at Wei Mengru behind him, and smiled. Go out and relax. If I guess correctly, there should be many disciples of the sect taking refuge outside now. The 9-life heavenly phoenix was the ruler of the demon world in the past. Most cultivators may not know the 9-life heavenly phoenix, but if the title of the first generation of the Demon King is mentioned, most people know it. However, probably no one would have thought that the former ruler of the demon world was suppressed by the Green Emperor under the pilgrimage hall of Lianji sect for 1,000 years, and even wanted to break free from the seal of the pure world Green Lotus and reappear in the world. Shang Yanfei, I will only give you half an hour to unlock the seal, or the entire Lianji sect will be buried with me. The gloomy voice sounded under the pilgrimage hall, and the tone was full of hysterical madness, which also attracted many cultivators to discuss and guess the identity of the sealed object under the pilgrimage hall. And the sound of this voice also alarmed the great powers in various parts of Zhuzhou. In the south wilderness, the western regions, Yuzhou and other places, several eyes quietly peeked at the scene in the dark. In theory, no matter how chaotic Dongzhou is, it has nothing to do with them. It is better to say that if Dongzhou can consume internal energy because of this, it will be more beneficial than harmful to them. But the geniuses in this Ascension Conference are still in Lianji section. If they are left alone, it will also be a huge loss for other states. After all, for the 3 imperial-level medicinal herbs, the people sent by Zhuzhou were all the chosen ones who were valued by the powerful people in the Hedeo realm. At this moment, countless eyes were staring at the direction of Lianji Peak, waiting for the response of the sect master. However, after nearly a quarter of an hour, there was still no response from the Lianji sect, as if it was indifferent. At this time, a phoenix cry resounded in the pilgrimage hall, and the black and red phoenix soared into the sky. The whole sky seemed to be burned red, and the raging fire was like the anger of heaven, burning the whole earth to ashes. At this moment, countless cultivators in the sect looked up at this scene. Their eyes were full of shock and fear hidden in their eyes. Some cultivators could not resist this pressure, and knelt on the ground uncontrollably, unable to resist the power of Hideo. Even those beings who are known as the proud ones of heaven are trembling in their hearts at this moment. They are trying their best to resist this pressure. Their shoulders are like huge mountains, and it is completely difficult to straighten their backs. The black phoenix slowly descended from the sky, and some people even knew that once the phoenix landed in the Lianji sect, the entire sect would probably be destroyed. As soon as Musian stepped out of Tianhe Garden, he saw this shocking scene. His body trembled slightly and he almost fell to his knees. The huge pressure came overwhelmingly like a sea wave, making Musian's legs weaken uncontrollably. This is the monk's instinctive reaction, which is irresistible. But Musian reacted very quickly and immediately hugged Wei Mengru's snow-white jade legs. Then, under the condescending and disdainful gaze of the maid, he gritted his teeth and stood up with difficulty, raised his head and said, "Sister Mengru, you cannot kneel. No one can kneel to the first-generation demon emperor." When he looked up, he saw Wei Mengru looking at him as if nothing happened, with disdain in her bright and beautiful eyes. She couldn't help but asked in shock, "Aren't you affected?" "I don't feel anything." Wei Mengru stared at Musian suspiciously. "I would rather say that your reaction is a bit too strange." At first she thought Musian was doing it on purpose, but now it seemed that he was indeed struggling to resist some invisible oppression. The Hideo realm naturally suppresses other monks. The great Hideo realm masters I got along with in the past all deliberately restrained their aura, but the first-generation demon emperor was different. He really planned to destroy the Lianji section. Mu Jianlian's tone of voice was a little more difficult. As for why Wei Mengru was not affected, I guess it was her original witch bloodline that affected her. Wei Mengru looked up at the black phoenix in mid-air and said softly, "The sect leader still doesn't seem to be planning to take action. She has her own plans, we just need to watch this drama," Musian said. For monks in the god-refining realm, battles of this level are too rare to see. Even a few simple battles can add a lot of insights to subsequent practice. As if the black phoenix symbolizing death slowly descended from the sky, deep in the south bank of the Isai sect, Regina walked out of the villa and looked up at the scene quietly, with a sickly expression as usual. Generally, it seems not to be affected in any way. The old man beside him covered himself with spiritual energy and stepped forward with difficulty, saying, "Miss, please leave the Lianji sect as soon as possible. This place will soon be razed to the ground. If I leave, you will be doomed." Regina turned her head and looked slightly, showing a coquettish smile. "But if I were here, they would do anything to keep us." Just as Regina expected, just when the black phoenix flames were about to shine on the entire Yi sect, someone deep in the southern wilderness finally couldn't help but open his eyes. And at that moment, outside Liangyi sect, a black mist suddenly fell from mid-air, forcibly wrapping the fire in it. Immediately afterwards, a gloomy voice slowly sounded in the Lianji sect, "Sect leader Shang, this is a civil strife in the Lianji section. Are you going too far by forcing me to take action?" Obviously, the mighty southern wilderness who took action was quite angry. Concubine Shang Yan was forcing them to take action because Regina was still in the Lianji section. No matter how talented the saintess of southern wilderness was, she could not resist the remaining power of the Hideo realm. Ever since the news that Regina's physique could evolve again reached the ears of the great powers in the southern wilderness that day, the importance of the saint has been elevated to the top position. Among the four pillar gods in the southern wilderness, one of them has never revealed his true form. That god can be said to be the real master of the southern wilderness, and Regina's physique is very close to that god. If she evolves, she will most likely surpass her ancestors and become the first person in the southern wilderness. For this reason, nothing must happen to Regina, and Musian, who helped her complete her physical evolution, must also be alive. Amitabha. Under the dark night, a loud bell-like sound of the Buddha's trumpet resounded in the sky above Lianji sect, and golden light shone. The Buddha in the middle clasped his hands together, raised his peaceful eyes, and stared in the direction of Lianji Peak. "Donor Shang, Are you going too far by taking advantage of me this time? At this time, a faint voice came from not far away. In order to prevent the Qing Emperor from joining the Tao, the western regions, southern wilderness, and some continents have intervened. Everyone is using each other. Since they are being used in this way, they will be used. You should take this breath seriously. The Buddha looked calm and turned to look at a shadow that appeared behind him at an unknown moment. The woman is wearing a long robe with a white skirt and gold thread. Her slender, jade-like legs are wrapped in black stockings. Below her knees are white high boots. Although it is just an illusory figure, it gives people unlimited reverie. The powerful Hedeo realm expert in Yuzhou is also the empress who controls the lifeblood of the entire Yuzhou, Luo Tan. You are really open-minded, Luo Tan, the powerful man in the southern wastelands said sadly. Previously, most people did not want the Qing Emperor to reunite. From that time until the Qing Emperor incident, there were more or less traces of several continents. Everyone knew it, but they just didn't speak out. After all, no matter who joins the Tao, they are bound to be stopped. Since they had done something secretly, there is nothing to say about being exploited now. Sect Master Shang, we can temporarily protect the Lianji sect, but you have to resolve the matter of the first demon emperor on your own. A powerful man in the southern wilderness spoke, and his eyes fell in the direction of Lianji Peak. Okay, concubine Shang Yan nodded slightly. As soon as these words came out, even several powerful experts in the Hedeo realm were aroused. From the past to the present, they have never seen concubine Shang Yan take action. If they can take this opportunity to see her, this trip will not be in vain. Several powerful men quietly isolated the Black Phoenix released by the first-generation Demon Emperor from the section. At the same time, they secretly observed the direction towards the temple, waiting for concubine Shang Yan to appear. A beautiful woman in a black dress was seen suspended in the mid-air of the pilgrimage hall. Her body was shrouded in a strange black fog, making it difficult to see her true body. But the few people present are all in harmony, and it is not difficult to distinguish the other person's aura even if it is just a ray of spiritual consciousness. After staring for a moment, an evil god in the southern wasteland suddenly frowned and said, "No. She is not concubine Shang Yan." As soon as these words came out, several people looked at each other. In the black mist, a girl in a black dress was staring into the depths of the pilgrimage hall. Although she deliberately hid her aura, some of the powerful ones still inexplicably noticed that the aura on the opponent's body seemed a bit strange. At this time, the woman in the black dress seemed to have noticed the gazes of several people. She turned her head slightly and looked over, with a charming and coquettish smile on her lips. The queen of the demon world. At this moment, this guess came into the minds of several people. This woman in black dress is not concubine Shang Yan, but the queen of the demon realm. Dong Zhou actually reached some kind of agreement with the queen of the demon realm, allowing her to set foot in the Liangyi sect. Concubine Shang Yan is really courageous. This move is no different from driving away a wolf and devouring a tiger. If she doesn't do it right, she may end up playing with fire and burning herself. Similar thoughts flashed through the minds of several powerful men. The first-generation Demon Emperor has been sealed in the pilgrimage hall for so long, but in the end he fought tooth and nail tonight. It is obvious that he also sensed the aura of the Queen of the Demon Realm. Obviously, the current ruler of the Demon Realm may have some threats to the first-generation Demon Emperor. Ability. However, this Queen of the Demon Realm is obviously just a ray of spiritual consciousness. How to deal with the first-generation Demon Emperor who has burned his essence at this moment? Boom. Outside the sex formation, the Black Phoenix hit the formation crazily. Countless monks looked at the scene in shock. Some monks who were still struggling to support themselves even couldn't help but kneel down. Even these monks are aware that this first-generation Demon King may be risking his life. Boom. As another soul-shaking voice resounded through the sect, the hearts of countless monks were shrouded in haze. At this moment, a ray of cyan light silently lit up in the pilgrimage hall. The green light was filled with tranquility, and a green and white lotus bloomed silently. Pure green lotus. The eyes of several powerful officials were a little more dignified when they saw Fairy Yao Meng looking down at the ground with bare feet in the pilgrimage hall. Qing Emperor. You have really recovered. That kid from the God-refining realm was indeed on your side. I should have eaten him alive. A hysterical sound came from the depths of the cathedral temple. The roar was loud and loud. But the eyes of several powerful men fell on Fairy Yao Meng, whose body was covered by the moonlight, at almost the same time, and the same thought flashed through their minds. A monk in the realm of refining gods? Qing Emperor was rescued by a monk in the god-refining realm, and even reshaped his immortal body? But how is this possible? If the god-refining realm can reshape the cauldron for the Hedeo realm, doesn't that mean that the other party's spiritual energy can even provide cultivation for Hedeo? And when these great powers were still skeptical, in front of the pilgrimage hall, Yao Meng's white jade feet stepped on the void, like a fairy from the 9 heavens descending to the mortal world, with a faint silver glow on her ice-white skin, looking down at the ground of the pilgrimage hall. She raised her hand to suppress the power of the pure world green lotus in the sky above the pilgrimage hall. It's useless. You can only suppress me, but you can't completely destroy me, the first-generation demon emperor laughed. This is his confidence, and this confidence comes from his true body. The 9-life heavenly phoenix will improve his strength a little more every time he is reborn. Although he is now wiped out by the purifying green lotus, as long as his spiritual consciousness is still there, he cannot truly die in these thousands of years. If he could be wiped out so easily, the Qing Emperor in the past would not have nearly died together with the first-generation demon emperor. Yao Meng looked down at the pilgrimage hall with a faint smile in his eyes. Sealing your cauldron is my task. As for other things, it has nothing to do with me. For some reason, after hearing these words, the first-generation demon king felt a little bit bad in his heart. At this moment, as if he noticed something, he suddenly looked up and saw that a woman in a black dress had appeared in the depths of the pilgrimage hall. The pupils of the first-generation demon emperor shrank suddenly. It's you, it's you. You are indeed here. The queen of the demon realm smiled sweetly. Your time is over, old man. She stretched out a delicate white palm from the black mist, and forcefully penetrated the heart of the first-generation demon emperor. At this moment, a strong demonic aura filled the hall. The first-generation demon emperor was extremely furious and started fighting with the queen of the demon world in the depths of the hall. And in the mid-air in the distance, the Empress of Yuzhou's eyes narrowed slightly, and she said softly, "The essence of the first demon emperor." Essence represents the lifelong cultivation of a cultivator. According to legend, the queen of the demon realm can absorb the essence of others for her own use. No matter whether the other party is returning to the void or the integration of the Tao, the essence of each cultivator can improve their cultivation a lot. If the essence is enough, she can even break through the limit and ascend to the immortal. Ordinary people cannot swallow the essence of others, but the queen of the demon realm can. The 9-life sky phoenix is indelible, but the ability of the queen of the demon realm completely kills the 9-life sky phoenix. The queen of Yuzhou stared at this scene, inadvertently glanced at the black-robed beauty who appeared behind them at some point, and smiled and said, "Master Shang is really generous. If I remember correctly, the demon realm and Dongzhou are generations of enemies. Let the queen of the demon realm swallow the essence of the first generation of the demon emperor. Don't you worry that Dongzhou will be robbed in the future. There is also a gap between the integration of the Tao. Once the queen of the demon realm swallows the essence of the integration of the Tao and completely refines it, the strength of the future queen of the demon realm will soar to an unimaginable level. By then, if the already powerful demon world has some ideas about Dongzhou, even the Lianji sect will probably be busy and exhausted." The flames in the pilgrimage hall shot up into the sky. In that magnificent and shocking scene, a faint smile appeared on the beautiful face of concubine Shang Yan. "It doesn't matter. If the Shang sect master is really outstanding, then we will wait and see. The evil god in the southern wilderness smiled faintly. The demon world and the southern wilderness are far apart. Even if the future demon queen's strength really improves again, it has nothing to do with the southern wilderness. Instead, the first to suffer is Dongzhou. At this time, a ray of green light flashed, and several people looked over. When they saw Yao Meng stepping on the void, the southern wilderness evil god was silent, and the Buddha in the western regions also remained silent. The powerful people in Yuzhou and Yunzhou seemed to be old acquaintances of Yao Meng, and immediately greeted him. Then, the Empress of Yuzhou looked at the monks on the ground. Even though the essence of the first generation of Demon King was being refined, the black phoenix in the air did not disappear. Under the pressure, most of the monks knelt on the ground uncontrollably, and only a few of them supported themselves and tried their best to resist the pressure. The saint of the southern wasteland is said to be the most promising genius to become the fourth pillar god. Today, I see that she is really amazing. The Empress's eyes fell on the depths of a villa on the south bank. When she saw the saint of the southern wasteland trying her best to resist the pressure of the first generation of Demon King, she admired sincerely. Regina is the first genius of my southern wasteland, so she is naturally talented. The southern wasteland evil god smiled faintly. Two geniuses came to the western region this time. One of them seemed to be eliminated in the martial arts assessment. I originally thought that his talent was average, but now it seems that this monk's talent is not bad, someone on the side said. His eyes fell on the monk Jing Chen, who was shining with Buddha's light and resisting the pressure. Buddha clasped his hands together and said calmly, Jing Chen was led into the thunder tribulation by a small cultivator of the fourth level of soul refining, and was eliminated. When they heard the fourth level of soul refining, several powerful people immediately lost interest. After all, this way of using thunder tribulation to perish together with others was something they had never seen in Juzhu before. Although there were some surprises, there were only a few. Several powerful people slowly swept their eyes over the cultivators. Someone saw the female cultivator who sacrificed the pure world blue lotus in front of the glazed palace to resist the pressure, and suddenly said, "Is that female cultivator the successor of the Green Emperor?" Well, although the pure world blue lotus is not even 1,000th of the Green Emperor, the enemies in the soul refining realm will probably have a headache when they see this thing. It's quite surprising that the Green Emperor has a successor. The female emperor of Yuzhou looked at Fairy Yao Meng. Yao Meng smiled lightly, her voice clear and pleasant. Qian'er has helped me a lot in the past. I chose her to repay her favors and to make up for my apology to her. Apology. The great powers looked at each other and saw a hint of doubt in each other's eyes. A great power in the Hedao realm feels sorry for a cultivator in the Lianshen realm? This Yeqian is a good seedling. If she is interested in the future, she can go to Yuzhou for further study for a year or two. The Empress's eyes were filled with sincere appreciation. Yao Meng smiled and said, if Qian'er knew, she would probably be very happy. Yuzhou has a very special terrain, and the way of cultivation is completely different from Dongzhou. If Yeqian can go to Yuzhou for further study in the future, her future growth will be much higher than now. The eyes of the great powers swept over those cultivators one by one. When seeing the black-robed young man struggling to support his body in front of the glazed palace, a powerful person nodded slightly and commented, "Not a bad seedling." Yu below seemed to have noticed the gazes of several powerful people, and there was a little more excitement in his eyes. He glanced at Musian, who was not far from the glazed palace. But in front of those real powerful people, who is the genius is obvious at a glance. Nowadays, there are no more than 10 cultivators who can maintain themselves under the pressure of the first generation of Demon Kings, and he is one of them. As for Musian, he just relied on the maid beside him to barely keep from kneeling down. If he can become an exchange student in Yuzhou after this, the resources and skills he can get in the future will be much more than now. This Yu is really like a cockroach. Even the thunder tribulation of 20 people can't kill him. God is really outrageous. Is there such an obvious help for others? Muzian held Wei Mengru's slender waist with both hands to maintain his body shape, and couldn't help but complain. He didn't expect to see Yayu just after leaving the glazed palace, and because of the pressure of the 9-life Sky Phoenix, they were unable to move, and could only use their own spiritual energy and willpower to fight against the power of the combined Wei. At that time in the martial world, he had no time to deal with Yayu, but now he saw that the other party had obtained the qualification for the assessment of the Ascension Conference. Sister Mengru, do you think it's outrageous? Muzian asked. Wei Mengru slightly side-eyed, with a trace of contempt in her eyes. I only know that if you make a move again, I will kick you off the cliff to see the spirit dragon now. This is just to resist the pressure of the first generation of Demon King, Muzian explained. Wei Mengru snorted coldly. Have you ever seen anyone put his hand on someone else's waist to resist the pressure? Muzian said teasingly. Then, after noticing Wei Mengru's sincere intention to kick him off the cliff, he had to withdraw his hand and said with a smile, it's just a joke. In fact, even without relying on Wei Mengru, Muzian can support himself to resist this pressure with his own spiritual energy, but he can't be close to Sister Mengru. However, since the other party has said so, he can only use the spiritual energy to cover the surface of his body to resist this pressure. Not far away, the Empress of Yuzhou glanced at the farce below with a smile, and chuckled, this little cultivator is content to eat soft rice. It is obvious that Muzian is opportunistic and did not really resist the pressure of the first generation of Demon King. He just relied on the yellow skirt beauty beside him to barely resist the pressure. This has nothing to do with genius. Just as the Empress was about to withdraw her gaze, as Muzian's aura covered her body, she was suddenly stunned for a moment, and then looked at Muzian with doubt. How could a 4th-grade soul refiner emit aura close to the peak of returning to the void? No. This peak of returning to the void aura does not seem to be his own. Yao Meng glanced at the Empress of Yuzhou inadvertently, raised her eyebrows slightly, and was about to speak to interrupt her thoughts. At this time, after a brief gaze, the Empress's eyes finally showed a little more interest, and she opened her red lips and said, what is the name of that little cultivator? The moment the voice fell, the eyes of several powerful people followed the Empress's line of sight and fell on Muzian. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 298. They seem to be looking at you. Several Hedeo realm masters looked at them at the same time. Wei Mengru was the first to notice. She pursed her red lips and reminded Muzian through voice transmission. What's so good about me? I don't have any words on my face. Muzian looked up and saw several Hedeo realm masters standing on the void. Some of them he had never seen before, such as the evil god of the southern wilderness, who always hid himself in the black fog and was difficult to see. Another example is the Buddha of the western regions, who had a peaceful face and was talking about the golden light rising behind his back. Next to them were the fairy sister Yao Meng, whom Muzian respected and admired, and the sister of the sect leader. Not far from Yao Meng, there was a woman wearing a white dress with gold thread. She was charming, with beautiful eyes and a smile, looking down at the many cultivators on the ground from a high position. She has a nice figure, and her breasts are not too big, so she should be able to hold them with one hand, but she has an elegant temperament, and the white skirt, black stockings and knee-high boots are a plus, Muzian commented secretly in his heart. At this time, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but for a moment, the woman in the white skirt in the air looked over with a faint smile in her eyes. Muzian was awed in his heart, and immediately lowered his head, maintaining his due humility. Although he didn't know the other party's identity, he knew that she should be one of the top existences in Zhuzhou because she could stand with the sect master and others. Luo Tan's beautiful eyes gazed at her, and a faint smile flashed in her beautiful eyes, and she said softly, "This disciple is interesting. There was not much awe in his eyes when he looked at me just now. How many disciples are there in Lianji sect at this moment?" There are too many to count. However, from just now to now, no disciple dared to observe her with such an appreciative eye. Even the descendants of those ancient families had to bow their heads when they saw the female emperor of Yuzhou. The Buddha of the western regions looked peacefully at the young man on the ground and said, "His spiritual energy is disordered and his breath fluctuates greatly, which seems to be caused by the failure of the tribulation." Failure of the tribulation. In the black fog, the eyes of the southern wilderness evil god flickered slightly, and he immediately thought of something and whispered, "Musian." Earlier, Musian had harmed 17 cultivators in the Thunder Tribulation, several of whom were the strongest competitors in this Ascension Conference. People in the southern wilderness and the western regions were harmed by Musian. In addition to the matter of Regina, the southern wilderness evil god was naturally familiar with this name. Luo Tan raised his eyebrows slightly, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Is he Musian? From the outside, he doesn't look like someone who would do such a crazy thing. For the sake of the maid beside him, he would not hesitate to lower his rank to make the cultivator who rashly approached Wei Mengru pay the price. At first, in the eyes of these powerful people, such a person should look like a reckless man. However, Musian looks like a very gentle and handsome young man. At first glance, he looks like a well-read gentleman. And, why does he have two different kinds of spiritual energy in his body? Luo Tan's eyes were a little interested, and he smiled lightly. I have heard before that the Qing Emperor reshaped the cauldron furnace, and behind it was the credit of a young cultivator named Musian, and what the first-generation Demon King just said is also of concern. She turned her head slightly to look at Yao Meng, and said, could it be that his physique is so special that he can reshape the cauldron furnace for the Hedeo realm? Yao Meng looked at Musian calmly. His voice was cold and pleasant, and he said in a warm voice, in the past, young friend Mu promised to reshape the cauldron furnace for the first-generation Demon King, but later for the sake of the people of Dongzhou, he chose to reshape the cauldron furnace for me. The medicinal materials I got for reshaping the cauldron furnace were all found by him with great effort. Yao Meng still gave Musian face, and did not say things like he chose me because he was greedy for my body, but raised the banner of justice. By the way, he avoided Luo Tan's question and changed his answer. As soon as he said this, Luo Tan's eyes became more interested. He looked at Musian for a while and said, I remember that the two kinds of natural treasures needed to reshape the cauldron are the Tiandan phoenix fruit and the water of reincarnation in the restricted area. The lord of the restricted area doesn't sell to anyone. How did he get the water of reincarnation? The saint of the restricted area is practicing as an inner disciple in the Lianji section. She happens to have a good relationship with Mu Xiao. Yao Meng's voice is soft, as if she doesn't belong to the mortal world. Her snow-white skin is crystal clear. Her bare jade feet step on the void, and her eyes inadvertently glance at Musian. In short, I owe a favor to friend Mu. He paid a great price for me in the past. If Fairy Yao Meng owes me a favor, I think my future cultivation will be much smoother. Luo Tan paused and said, if Fairy Yao Meng asks for this, I can make an exception and accept an extra cultivator in the exchange of new students in the future. She always felt that the aura that Musian just emitted was a little bit wrong, but she couldn't tell why now, because at this moment, the sect formation in Lianji sect had been activated by several chiefs. In the sect formation, the aura of the disciples in the sect could not be confirmed in the first time even by the great masters of Hedeo realm. Yao Meng shook his head gently and said, no need, I also want to take this opportunity to repay the favor I owed him in the past. It would be inconvenient if I went to Yuzhou. The cold wind blew, Yao Meng's green skirt fluttered slightly, her hair flew, and her beautiful and flawless face was set off. This scene made many monks look a little dumbfounded. Although from an outsider's perspective, they could only vaguely see a hazy curve shrouded in silver light, it happened to be this unreal haziness that gave people infinite admiration. Daydream. Yao Meng's emerald green eyes looked condescendingly at the young man on the ground, his pink lips pursed slightly, and immediately outlined a charming arc. After this, I will teach him myself. This time, even the evil god of the southern wilderness couldn't help but glance at Yao Meng, with a hint of doubt in his eyes hidden under the black mist. When did Qing Emperor care so much about a young monk? Also, Regina said before that Muzian could make her soul-reading body evolve and become the first ever physique in the southern wilderness, and she confirmed with her soul-reading body at that time that Muzian was not lying. What can a monk in the god-refining realm do to help Regina complete the evolution of reading souls? There should be some secrets hidden in Muzian's body, so even Qing Emperor is very concerned about him. While several powerful officials were still curiously observing Muzian, who was struggling to support himself on the ground, in the Liuli Palace, a beauty wearing a white palace skirt walked out of the palace door on exquisite and small embroidered shoes. She raised her beautiful face and swept her moist and tender eyes over the monks outside the Liuli Palace. She soon noticed Muzian not far away and shouted softly, "Mr. Mu." Seeing Muzian struggling to support Hideo Yue, Bairuoxi stepped forward in small steps, took Wei Mengru's place, supported Muzian, and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" This scene made the monks present look at Bairuoxi with a bit more monster-like surprise. At this moment, the Black Phoenix released by the first-generation Demon Emperor has not dissipated, and the pressure of Hideo makes everyone breathless. As a result, this inner disciple of Kanghai Peak turned out to be just like a normal person? Also, isn't Muzian going too far? Some monks and sect disciples who had passed the martial arts assessment in advance looked at Muzian deeply at this moment, with a bit of hatred in their eyes. There are many outstanding female cultivators in the world of cultivating immortals, but Muzian monopolizes two beauties. This scene naturally makes some male cultivators feel a little grudgeful, and they wish they could start a cultivating conference now to do this in front of them. Muzian, who was showing off, punched several times in the face. Even if this was not Muzian's original intention. Even Yayu, who was originally proud of his ability to withstand the power of Hideo, could no longer laugh at this moment. His eyes were fixed on Muzian and the beautiful white lady who had completely regarded him as nothing. In the past, Bairuoxi would occasionally look at him, but now the beauty of Tianqian City seemed to have completely taken on the shape of Muzian, and her eyes were filled with Muzian's figure and no one else. He is obviously better than Muzian in every aspect, and even the original test monument had the same result, but why is everyone staring at him now? Yayu clenched his fists tightly and stared in the direction of Muzian. His nails seemed to be embedded in his palms, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable hatred. But no matter how much Muzian played tricks, he finally passed the Immortal Ascension Conference. How he performed when the first-generation Demon Emperor came this time was also noticed by the great powers in the Hideo realm. If there is an exchange of new students' activity in Yuzhou or Nanhuang in the future, his name will also be the first to come to mind. The maid beside Muzian and Bairuoxi are indeed talented, but this has nothing to do with Muzian. Those powerful eyes were sharp. When Yayu thought of this, the anger in his heart finally slowly subsided. At this moment, in the air, the eyes of the Empress of Yuzhou, who had a gorgeous temperament and a beautiful face, fell on the beauty in the palace dress who had just walked out of the Liuli Palace. Seeing her looking at Muzian with concern, her eyes were filled with tears. With gentle eyes that make even women feel moved when they see her, he couldn't help but ask, "Who is she?" Nanhuang Mighty also said, "It's a bit strange." Logically speaking, with the power of Hideo, only the return to the void realm can barely resist and move freely. The monks in the god-refining realm can maintain themselves without kneeling. It is the ultimate, but this woman he doesn't seem to be feeling any discomfort at all, he can still move freely. The Buddha of the western region opened his eyes slightly and stared at the beauty in a white palace dress in the distance. His eyes were peaceful, but those who knew his skills knew clearly that the Buddha was trying to see Bairuoxi's true nature. Neither Yao Meng nor Shang Yanfei stopped them. Although they did not have any conversation, they remained silent in a tacit understanding. At this time, there seemed to be some spiritual consciousness in Bairuoxi's body that quietly opened its eyes, and at that moment, the figure of the Buddha of the Western region suddenly shook, and the golden light behind him almost shattered. He clasped his hands together and shouted the Buddha's name, Amitabha. From the palm of his hand, a ray of golden light spread like ripples, allowing the Buddha to suppress the chaotic spiritual energy just now. If the spiritual energy of this clone is damaged, it will also affect the original body far away in the Western region. The other two powerful men were a little frightened and subconsciously looked at Bairuoxi. Even if this Buddha from the Western regions only has a ray of spiritual consciousness, it is impossible for him to be injured in the ordinary realm of refining gods, but now this Buddha from the Western regions has obviously seen something and his spiritual consciousness has been injured. At this time, the Buddha of the Western region stabilized the chaotic spiritual energy, slowly opened his eyes, stared at Bairuoxi's figure, and said slowly, Gong Lian Yu. Yuzhou's Empress's eyes flickered slightly, and she couldn't help but look at Bairuoxi, who looked like she had a small breast and a gentle and pleasant temperament. The reincarnation of the Sword Palace Master? The eyes of the southern wilderness evil god flickered slightly, and he couldn't believe it, she is still alive. The Buddha stopped talking, but his eyes, which were always calm, also had a bit more solemnity. If we count the two Hedeo realm masters and Linglong in the Lianji sect, plus the reborn King Di and the Sword Palace Master, there are a total of 4 Hedeo realm masters. This is a very exaggerated number, because in Zhuzhu, at most only one Hedeo realm can appear in each life. Only when the Hedeo realm of the previous life seals itself in the formation or never comes out again, it is possible to help others and appear the second Hedeo. This is the rule of heaven and earth, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth is not enough to support the existence of too many Hedeo realm masters. If you have to say, the Sword Palace Master's cultivation age is much older than Yao Meng, Yuzhou, Nanhuang and other great powers. In the past, it was precisely because the rules of heaven and earth believed that Gong Lianyu was dead that a new Hedeo realm appeared. But now, the Sword Palace Master actually appeared in front of them alive. Even if it is only the refining god realm now, once the existence in her body awakens, Bairuoxi, as the scabbard, can also return to Hedeo in a short time. No wonder Shang Yanfei is so confident. Even if the queen of the demon realm really swallowed up the essence of the first generation of the demon king, she would not dare to rashly attack Dongzhou. For Hedeo, even the demon realm has to think about it. And this does not count the forbidden area that does not fight with the world. If the lord of the forbidden area is counted, Dongzhou's current combat power is simply unimaginable. You know, some states may only have one Hedeo realm, and some even do not see the figure of the Hedeo master. And this Dongzhou alone now has 4. Among them, 2 great masters in the Hedeo realm were related to a young cultivator in the Lianshen realm. Thinking about it, the 3 great masters looked at Musian inadvertently. It was all a bit too coincidental. Musian happened to save Fairy Yao Meng, happened to become a Taoist partner with the Sword Palace Master, and happened to have a maid with amazing talent. Is it because of his luck, or? When the great master from all over Zhuzhu was thinking about all kinds of things, a sharp and piercing phoenix cry resounded through the sky in the depths of the pilgrimage temple. The whole sky was dyed black and red at that moment, the lead-colored clouds were burned black and red, and the clouds shook violently under the sky, and the roaring thunder seemed to shatter the sky. Immediately afterwards, a phoenix with dark flames burning on its wings rose from the depths of the pilgrimage temple, as if to burn the entire sky to ashes. This scene made some cultivators who were still struggling to hold on unable to restrain themselves and could not help but kneel on the ground. Musian was also not feeling well, because he was now holding Bairuoxi's slender waist with both hands, his body pressed against her back, smelling her unique body fragrance, and he was almost unable to control himself. At this time, a black mist rose into the sky, and in the black mist, a slender palm reached out to the black phoenix, and then gently pinched it. Bang! The Black Phoenix was completely shattered, and the violent impact caused the entire Lianji sect to shake violently. The Queen of the Demon Realm in the Black Mist looked down at all living beings from a high position, feeling the power flowing in her body, and her eyes followed to Shang Yanfei. Shang Yanfei was wearing a black robe, outlining her graceful and tight figure. As if she noticed the sight, she looked sideways. "Master Shang, happy cooperation." The soft voice of the Queen of the Demon Realm sounded in Shang Yanfei's ears. It was obviously just a very ordinary tone, but it made people feel itchy, as if their bones were numb. Even the southern wilderness evil god and even the Buddha of the western regions were a little wary of the Demon Realm Queen, who had made a big step forward in strength. However, Shang Yanfei's expression did not change much, and she just smiled and responded, "Happy cooperation." The voices of the two were only heard between each other, and no one else could hear any sound at all. The Demon Realm Queen raised her head slightly, looking at the first generation of Demon King who had long disappeared. She stretched out her slender jade-like palm, looked at the snowflakes falling on her palm, and said faintly, "In order to deal with that old guy, my strength has become stronger." Should I say that you believe that the demon world will not invade Dongzhou, or that you have enough confidence in your own strength? When she said the last sentence, she inadvertently glanced at the beautiful black-robed beauty. Shang Yanfei smiled brightly, "A little bit of both." The Demon Realm Queen narrowed her beautiful eyes and said lightly, "In order to protect the sect, you actually opened the door to let your enemies step into the Lianji section. If you were playing chess, you might have lost miserably." Maybe Shang Yanfei still responded lightly. The Queen of the Demon Realm looked at her deeply, raised her hand and waved away the black mist, and the Queen of the Demon Realm disappeared into the night. This time, she got the essence of the first generation of the Demon King, and she will need some time to refine this essence in the future. After that, she, who is already in the Hedeo realm, will be much stronger than other Hedeo realms, and even become an immortal. Concubine Shang Yan looked at the Queen of the Demon Realm leaving calmly, and then her eyes inadvertently glanced at the door of the glazed palace, and Musian, who was standing in front of the door at this moment. As if he had noticed a slightly familiar and unfamiliar sight, Musian looked up. The Peerless Leader's sister lowered her head and stared at him quietly in mid-air, and suddenly smiled brightly. "You have already lost completely," she said softly. However, I don't know who she was talking to. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 299. With the departure of the Demon Queen, the breath of the first-generation Demon King also completely disappeared in the pilgrimage hall. Most of the cultivators didn't even know what happened. They only knew that a certain evil creature was originally sealed in the depths of Lianji sect, and now, that evil creature has been completely destroyed. Musian looked at this scene, and the gradually fading power of the first-generation Demon King, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then, recalling the various scenes just now, he couldn't help but sigh, that beautiful snake is really dangerous. Although it fascinates all living beings, it eats people without spitting out bones. I still have to be more careful in the future. At that time, she seemed to have swallowed something, but I didn't see what it was. Ryuoxi suddenly said. What did the Demon Queen swallow? Hearing this, Musian's mind gradually became active. The Queen of the Demon Realm would not help Dongzhou or even Lianji sect for no reason. There must be some kind of deal between her and concubine Shang Yan, and the benefits of this deal are so great that the Queen of the Demon Realm agreed to cooperation. And now it seems that the core of the benefits of this deal is probably something left behind by the first generation of the Demon King. I think it should be the essence at this time. A clear and pleasant familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Musian turned his head and looked, surprised. When did Sister Lingxian come to the sect? Ya Lingxian walked down the steps of the hall, Her pretty and delicate face was white and flawless, her hair was loose, her petite body was wrapped in a slender purple skirt, and under her slender legs was a pair of delicate and small embroidered shoes. She looked pure and lovely, and exuded a light and elegant temperament. She came over with a smile and said, "I just came back not long ago. I was a little worried about you, but now it seems that there should be no problem." "What is the essence that Sister Lingxian just mentioned? Why didn't we notice it?" Musian asked curiously. "Essence exists in every cultivator's body. It can be said that it directly represents the cultivation of a cultivator's life. The queen of the demon realm just swallowed the essence of the first generation of the demon emperor," Ye Lingxian said softly. "However, this way of swallowing essence can only be done by people with special physiques like the queen of the demon realm. If an ordinary person swallows the essence of others, he will probably explode and die before refining it. The queen of the demon realm is interested in the essence of the first generation of the demon emperor, so she will come to Lianji sect in person to get rid of the first generation of the demon emperor." Musian understood slightly in his heart. And then, he couldn't help but worry a little more. According to his understanding, the original strength of the queen of the demon realm should be equal to that of other Hedeo realms. If she refines the essence of the first generation of the demon king in the future, to what extent will her strength soar? By the way, has Sister Mengru taken out the heavenly qi? Ye Lingxian suddenly asked. As soon as this was said, Wei Mengru, who had been keeping quiet, suddenly looked a little strange, while Bairuoxi smiled and looked at Musian, with tenderness in her eyes. Ye Lingxian realized that something was wrong, blinked, and looked at Musian. "What's wrong? Did you fail?" "Thanks to Sister Mengru's help, it went smoothly." Musian maintained his usual smile. Then, he proposed to send Ye Lingxian and Ye Qian back, and also winked at Wei Mengru, giving her a hint with his eyes, and sent a voice message, "Sister Mengru, Ruoxi will be handed over to you." Wei Mengru immediately glanced at Musian with contempt, but did not refuse. After all, she had known Musian's behavior and even his personality for a long time. Wei Mengru was not surprised that he would speak at this moment. When Musian was about to send Ye Lingxian back, several powerful people in the air at this moment, following the death of the first generation of Demon King, also put away the spiritual energy that maintained the formation. The Buddha of the Western regions clasped his hands together and left quietly. The eyes of the southern wilderness evil god were always looking at Musian. No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure out what this little cultivator in the refining god realm had to complete the evolution of the soul-reading body for Regina. "Do you have anything else to say?" At this time, Yao Meng suddenly spoke coldly, interrupting the thoughts of the southern wilderness evil god. Although it was impossible for a male cultivator to notice Musian's natural furnace, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Fairy Yao Meng didn't want too many people to notice Musian's situation. The southern wasteland evil god said sinisterly, "I am just a little concerned about how this kid can attract the attention of Fairy Yao Meng. Now it seems that he has good talent. This is actually a bit like perfunctory. The so-called good talent can basically be used for most cultivators, and this kind of praise is only used when you don't know what to praise." Because the shadow of the southern wasteland was involved in the previous obstruction of the Green Emperor, the southern wasteland evil god would naturally not make himself unhappy at this moment. After a few simple perfunctory words, he left the Lianji sect. After solving two troubles, Yao Meng's eyes fell on the last person. She looked at the Empress of Yuzhou and showed a charming smile. "What's wrong, Luo Tan? Is there someone you like among the cultivators here?" Luo Tan looked at Ye Lingxian's back with interest and said, "She is a natural spirit, right? Whether it is cultivation or alchemy, she is a good seedling, it makes people want to take her as a disciple. Yuzhou has been known as the holy land of alchemists since the past. On the one hand, this is because the Empress herself is a heavenly alchemist. On the other hand, many of the prescriptions in Zhuzhou actually originated from Yuzhou. Handed down. The Lord of the Forbidden Zone has just such a daughter. She has been soaking in reincarnation water since she grew up. Her natural spiritual body has already reached its peak. If she is talented in alchemy, she is probably much better than those geniuses in Yuzhou. Yao Meng said with a faint smile. If I remember correctly, Fairy Yao Meng didn't have much interaction with the restricted area in the past. How did she know so clearly? Luo Tan asked curiously. Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly and said calmly, her sister Yeqian is my disciple, so I have heard her say some things in this regard. In fact, Yeqian didn't know that much in detail. Most of it was what Muzian told her before, and some things she occasionally heard when she woke up in Muzian's body. Of course, it was impossible to say this to Luo Tan. After all, Luo Tan seemed to be interested in Muzian from just now. If it weren't for the magic weapon left by Ling Long, the secret of the natural furnace cauldron would have been revealed. It was exposed. By that time, there is no guarantee that the Empress will be interested in the natural furnace. At this time, concubine Shang Yan suddenly said, if you are interested in Ye Lingxuan's child, you can hold an alchemy competition after the Immortal Ascension Conference and observe her alchemy talent. If you are interested, you can accept her as a disciple. Luo Tan narrowed her beautiful eyes, took a look at the mature female sect leader with sexy and elegant figure, and said with a smile, are you willing to give up such an outstanding sect disciple to me? Concubine Shang Yan smiled casually, if she can go to Yuzhou to train for a period of time in the future, she will also be greatly improved. Why not do it? Luo Tan thought about it for a moment and smiled sweetly, since the sect leader has kindly invited me, let's stay in the Lianji sect for a few more days. At the end of the sentence, she inadvertently looked towards the direction Muzian left. It just so happens that I also have some things that I care about. Dexin Court. Muzian sent Ye Lingxian and Yeqian all the way back to the villa and planned to leave. Yeqian saw Muzian stopping at the door and couldn't help but ask, Brother Mu, why don't you come in and sit for a while? Seeing this, Ye Lingxian also smiled and said, Qianer has said so, why don't Brother Mu come in and sit for a while? Ye Lingxian is a relatively reserved girl, and she wants to maintain her sister image in front of her younger sister, so she will not take the initiative to retain Muzian. But if my sister opened this mouth, she would naturally have no objection. Hearing this, Muzian could only nod slightly and said with a smile, in that case, I'll excuse you first. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that I haven't had a good chat with you for a while. Tianhe Garden. Bairuoxi and Wei Mengru were walking in front of a quiet corridor. The cold and delicate Miss Bai stood at the door of the room and said softly, Sister Mengru, just come here. Wei Mengru nodded slightly, and when Bairuoxi opened the door, she hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, don't you blame me. What she was referring to was naturally what happened between her and Muzian in her room. Bairuoxi shook her head gently and said with a smile, this is not Sister Mengru's problem, but Mu Lang's request, right? So it should be Mu Lang who is to blame. She paused and continued, of course, I won't do anything too extreme to him. I know that Mu Lang's feelings for me have not changed. She gave her the spirit of heaven and solved one problem after another. Muzian never complained, and when she punished Muzian, the other person's eyes were still full of love when he looked at her. Although she was a little carefree, Bairuoxi always kept in mind what Muzian did in the past. If you don't give him some lessons that impress him occasionally, he won't have a long memory. Wei Mengru started to sell the master. Bairuoxi put her fingertips on her chin, raised her head slightly and thought about Wei Mengru's words. What an impressive lesson. She suddenly chuckled, I think it's okay if I don't need to do anything. She turned her head and looked at Wei Mengru, I am a person who is easier to talk to, but the same cannot be said for the other me. Although she occasionally thinks about locking Muzian in a small dark room, and also has dark thoughts about locking him with her forever, Bairuoxi is generally a gentle and considerate good girl. But Gong Lianyu is different. The Lord of the Sword Palace was strong and domineering, a person who would put his thoughts into action. If she were to completely wake up from her deep sleep after refining the spirit in the future, Musian's troubles would be over. As for now, let's just think of it as giving him some small freedom. Late at night. Because of the fact that the evil things in the temple broke the seal today, the monks in the sect have lost the desire to practice and are discussing the matter lively with each other. The evil god of the southern wilderness, the Buddha of the western regions, the Empress of Yuzhou and several other great powers came out together with the mysterious black mist power to suppress the evil thing. Although the black mist that appeared in the air at that time was not clearly visible. Who is it, but being able to witness that earth-shattering battle and deeply feel the coercion of the Hedeo realm, this has surpassed more than 99% of the monks, and can also become a topic of conversation for them in the future. Not to mention the impressive evil things, the beauty of Luo Tan, Yao Meng, Shang Yanfei and others is unforgettable. The three have their own unique looks. The sect master is sacred in the eyes of the sect disciples, and the Empress of Yuzhou is peerless today. As for Fairy Yao Meng, even if she is not born with the physique of Taoism, the hazy mystery alone is enough to make her the dream lover of countless cultivators. Of course, no matter who it is, they just hide this love in their hearts, for fear of blaspheming the fairy. While the sect was discussing this matter, Musian had just had an intimate exchange with the sisters of the Ye family and returned to Tianhe Garden in the middle of the night. Today, he was oppressed by Biruoxi in various ways, consuming a lot of spiritual energy, so he naturally planned to take a good rest tonight. However, as soon as he opened the door, he saw Yao Meng sitting in front of the bed. She was wearing a light long skirt with a blue base and white floral patterns, which covered her graceful and exquisite figure. On her stunning face, there was a faint smile. Under the skirt, she could vaguely see her jade-like legs and bare snow-like toes. She was holding a fiery red fruit that looked like a sculpture. It seems that you are quite busy every day. I have been in the room for almost an hour. Yao Meng smiled faintly and looked at Musian with her eyes. Musian reacted quickly, coughed lightly, and said, Sister Chiener didn't understand the problem of the technique, so it took some time. As he said that, he closed the door and smiled, if I knew that fairy sister was waiting for me, I would have come earlier. Yao Meng's beautiful green eyes revealed a soft smile, I'm afraid that if you knew I was here, you wouldn't be intimate with your sister Lingxian and my disciple, right? Musian smiled helplessly and said, Fairy sister misunderstood, they are just my sisters. Yao Meng didn't seem to care about these things, hooked her finger, and motioned Musian to come over. When Musian came closer, she handed the fruit in her hand to him. Originally, I planned to give it to you after the Ascension conference was over, but since you left the martial world in advance, let's refine it first while the martial world assessment has not ended in the past 2 days, Yao Meng said with a smile. Musian took a look and raised his head and said, Heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit. Yao Meng nodded slightly, it can give you a chance to be reborn when you are seriously injured in the future, and it will also be of great help to the recovery of your spiritual energy. After saying that, seeing that Musian did not move for a long time, Yao Meng raised her eyes and smiled lightly, you are not going to say that this thing is too expensive and I can't accept it, right? Musian's help to her cannot be compensated by a heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit. After all, compared with the price he paid for his rebirth in the past, a heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit is nothing. Musian came back to his senses, took the heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit, and smiled, I'm just thinking about how to refine this thing. As he said that, his eyes stayed on Yao Meng for a long time. Can I just eat it directly? Musian asked again. You can also choose to extract its spiritual energy, you don't have to take it directly. Fairy Yao Meng smiled. Musian understood, so that's how it is, I'll refine it after this. Yao Meng glanced at Musian's warm hand on her waist, and a trace of unnatural shyness flashed across her delicate face, but she still maintained her fairy appearance and smiled, You don't have to wait until later, you can refine it now. But I want to refine it with my fairy sister, Musian said. Together. Yao Meng tilted her head slightly, with a hint of doubt in her eyes. At this time, Musian pressed Yao Meng's shoulders and let her fall on the bed behind him. He grabbed the Tiandan phoenix fruit, squeezed it gently, and poured the juice of the Tiandan phoenix fruit on Yao Meng's body. Yao Meng opened her misty eyes slightly, and the cold fairy image in the eyes of the world disappeared. Under her cold eyes, she seemed to be a little charming, with a charm that mixed coldness and charm together. Is there anyone who wastes as much as you? Her tone was full of teachings, but her eyes were filled with shame and expectation. Don't worry, I won't waste a single drop, Musian grinned, savoring the taste of the Tiandan phoenix fruit. After a while, Yao Meng slightly opened her beautiful eyes, hugged the back of Musian's head, and whispered, the Empress of Yuzhou seems to care about you. You must remember not to expose the Tiansheng furnace, so as not to cause too much trouble. I know. Musian answered vaguely. Now, compared with these things, refining the Tiandan phoenix fruit is more important. For this reason, the juice of the Tiandan phoenix fruit, naturally, cannot be wasted. North Continent, Demon Realm. The queen of the demon realm sat lazily leaning against the throne, looking like she was taking a nap. The loose robe could hardly cover her full and upright chest, her slender legs were crossed as she sat, and her loose hair set off her charming face. On the surface, the ruler of Bizhu seemed to be just taking a short nap, but only the personal maid who was not far from her knew that the spirit of the demon queen was no longer in Bizhu. I hope everything goes well for the queen. The maid looked at the ruler of Dongzhou with an obsessed look, and prayed for her silently in her heart. As one of the 13 seats in the demon world, this maid is the second of the 13 seats, and is also responsible for all the activities of the queen of the demon world. Only this maid knows about the departure from Bizhu this time. If everything goes well and the essence of the first generation of the demon emperor is swallowed up, then it will be the best time for the demon world to occupy Dongzhou. This step is a helpless move by concubine Shang Yan, but it is also within the expectations of the queen of the demon world. In this world, except for the queen of the demon world, no one can solve the first generation of the demon emperor intact. The leader of the Lianji sect may be able to defeat the first generation of the demon emperor, but the battle between the two Hedeo realm will probably cost a lot of disciples of the sect. At this moment, the spiritual energy around suddenly surged wildly in an uncontrollable way. The next moment, the queen of the demon realm slowly opened her eyes. Her charming temperament seemed to be even more charming at this moment. She was so beautiful that people could not look away. Even if they knew that this was a dangerous existence that would eat people without spitting out bones, they would still fall in love with her uncontrollably. The maid immediately reacted and said respectfully, Your Majesty, I have prepared a medicinal bath for you. It takes a while for the queen of the demon realm to refine the essence. If it is supplemented by a medicinal bath, it can speed up the progress. The queen of the demon realm nodded slightly, You go down first. The maid bowed respectfully, Yes. After watching the maid leave, the queen of the demon realm tapped the edge of the chair with her slender knuckles, recalling what happened in Lianji sect today. Shang Yanfei didn't seem like that kind of fool, but the other party did give her the essence of the first generation of the Demon King for nothing. This is a bit unbelievable. However, no matter what Shang Yanfei was thinking, once she refined the essence of the first generation of Demon King, even without the blessing of heavenly energy, Shang Yanfei would no longer be her opponent. This is really a bad move, the Demon Queen chuckled and slowly stood up from the throne. At this moment, an inexplicable picture suddenly flashed through her mind, and a slight dizziness came over her. Then, a torrent of memories came surging, not giving her a chance to react at all, and all kinds of pictures she had never experienced flashed quickly in her mind. She panted slightly, and when the picture completely disappeared from her mind, the Demon Queen slowly raised her head and looked in the direction of Lianji sect. The enchanting eyes showed incredible surprise, and nostalgia. She awakened the memory of her previous life. And here is the world of the second round. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 300. In the splendid ancient hall, the queen of the demon realm, who charms all living beings, is leaning in front of the throne with her hands on her forehead, her thoughts in a mess. In the charming eyes of the past, now there was a bit of loss-like worry about gain and loss. This world is not a first-run world, but a second-run world that has been restarted once. The so-called second game, to put it bluntly, means restarting after the game is cleared, or it means going through a reincarnation. In other words, the world today is already in its second reincarnation. Silence digested this information in front of the throne. After an unknown amount of time, the queen of the demon realm slowly raised her head and looked in a certain direction of Dongzhou, as if through many obstacles, she could reach someone in the Lianji sect at the moment. Who would have thought that a young monk in the god-refining realm would actually be Taoist companions with the queen of the demon realm in the past week? Even the current queen of the demon realm is a little unbelievable. However, in addition to disbelief in my heart, there is more of an indescribable nostalgia. If I hadn't just awakened the memory of my past life before retreating, I'm afraid I wouldn't have expected it now, right? No wonder concubine Shangyan gave up the essence of the first-generation demon emperor. On the one hand, concubine Shangyan was too confident in herself, and on the other hand, it was also to allow her to retreat and concentrate on refining the essence. He did not hesitate to give up the essence of the first-generation demon emperor to make her seclusion. What is concubine Shangyan's purpose? Before awakening her memory, the queen of the demon realm would never have been able to think of the answer. But at this moment, she had already vaguely guessed something in her heart. The queen of the demon realm slightly pursed her sexy red lips, and sat with her elastic legs crossed, her long knuckles gently tapping the edge of the chair. Benedict. She tapped the edge of the chair with her slender fingers, and the queen of the demon realm's eyes flickered slightly. Maybe concubine Shangyan is also a reborn person? Concubine Shangyan hopes that she can go into seclusion within this year to devour the essence of the first-generation demon emperor. As for the reason, I'm afraid it has something to do with Musian. However, even that woman would not have thought that she would awaken the memory of her past life before going into seclusion, right? The queen of the demon realm gently placed her slender fingers on her plump breasts, raised her head slightly and closed her eyes, as if she was feeling the heartbeat that had not accelerated for a long time, and the emptiness hidden in her heart at this moment. She slowly opened her charming eyes and looked at the maid who walked into the hall. "Your Majesty the Queen, the medicinal bath is ready." The personal maid who had prepared the medicinal bath lowered her head slightly, maintaining respect for the queen of the demon world. "I will officially retreat in half a month. After that, the affairs here will be left to you and others to handle," the queen of the demon realm said. "I will take care of everything and live up to your expectations," the maid immediately said respectfully, lowering her head slightly, trying to hide the enthusiasm in her heart as much as possible. The queen of the demon realm's charm does not distinguish between men and women. Coupled with her mind-reading ability, it is too difficult to hide one's thoughts in front of her. If one does not let go of desires as much as possible, her thoughts will be easily detected. Although the memory of the queen of the demon realm's awakening from her previous life may have exceeded Shang Yanfei's expectations, the essence of the Hedeo realm has now been swallowed by her, and it must be refined no matter what, otherwise this essence will be transformed into her practice obstacles on the road. For this reason, I have to retreat for a period of time no matter what. If supplemented by medicinal baths, it may not take a year and a half, but 3 or 4 months to completely refine the essence of the first-generation demon emperor. However, before that, there is still something that needs to be done. I need you to do one more thing. The maid looked up and saw the queen of the demon realm sitting condescendingly in front of the throne, looking at her, and said softly, there is a young monk named Musian in the Lianji section. Contact the 7th seat and ask her to find a suitable opportunity to Musian brings the demon world. The maid respectfully responded yes at first, then hesitated for a moment and said, isn't Musian the queen's spy in the Liangyi sect in the past? Now we want to bring him back. Could it be that there is something important about him? Secret? No secrets. The queen of the demon realm lazily stretched her sexy waist and looked up in the direction of the Yi sect. His existence is much more important than the so-called secret. Dexon Court. Yechian sat in front of the courtyard and chatted with her sister for a while, then stood up and planned to leave. Sister, I'm going back to meditate and practice first. Although Brother Mu's side is fine, we still have to practice hard to prepare for the upcoming Immortal Ascension Conference. Ye Lingxian raised his head and looked at his sister with a smile, and said, I told you before when I was in the martial arts world that Brother Mu would be fine, but you just didn't believe it and insisted on coming out early. Now you know you regret it, right? Ye Qian's pretty face turned red. She glanced at Ye Lingxian and said, wasn't my sister also very anxious at that time, and she even sacrificed her ancestral weapon to make the monks who were in the martial arts world flee everywhere? Why are you talking like you are chasing ducks? Ye Lingxian showed a faint smile. I believe Brother Mu will be fine, but I still want to go back to see him as soon as possible if possible. Ye Qian tilted his head. Isn't that why you are worried? Because you are worried about him? Ye Lingxian was speechless for a moment. When I was outside Li Yulai Palace just now, I saw that Brother Ye Yu's strength had become a lot stronger, and he seemed to have been staring at us, Ye Qian said suddenly. Ye Lingxian said lightly, and then nothing happened. For Ye Lingxian, Ye Yu was just a member of the Ye family in the past. She called him Brother Ye Yu out of politeness, but she had no feelings for Ye Yu from beginning to end. No, if Ye Yu could take care of Ye Qian a little when he was a child, their relationship might not be so cold now. Ye Qian nodded slightly, looking at her sister's beautiful and refined face, and said, that's right, Brother Ye Yu can't give me happiness, but Brother Mu can. Ye Lingxian immediately rolled her eyes at Ye Qian. What are you talking about? You are the one who likes Brother Mu, even if the one who is happy must be you. Ye Qian stared at her sister quietly and said softly, but isn't my sister already with Brother Mu? Ye Lingxian was stunned for a moment, and the indifferent smile of the past disappeared. Do you know? Ye Qian blushed and nodded slightly. When I heard my sister's voice outside, she called so nicely. Before she finished speaking, Ye Lingxian covered her mouth. Under the gaze of Ye Qian's sparkling eyes, Ye Lingxian blushed and whispered, don't talk about this, it's really embarrassing. In the eyes of the world, the Forbidden Area Saint is a polite and elegant little beauty, but she is just a white man who knows nothing about love. She had a relationship with Musian only that one time. At this moment, she was so ashamed that she wanted to hide in the ground when her sister mentioned it so bluntly. As if to change the subject, Ye Lingxian suddenly said, when are you going to tell Brother Mu about your feelings? Ye Qian shook her head and smiled, I just want to see my sister happy. Ye Lingxian looked at the sister who grew up with her with concern, thinking that this sister might be terminally ill. Could it be that when she was intimate with Brother Mu in the future, her sister was always peeping outside? She couldn't quite understand why Ye Qian had such a strange hobby. If possible, she would rather let Jianer be happy than let Jianer watch from outside, even if she and Jianer were together. Ye Qian continued, I'll go back to my room first, sister. I have to go to Tianhe Garden tomorrow. I still have some questions about the Pure World Green Lotus technique that I want to ask Master. Ye Lingxian looked as if she wanted to say something but stopped. What's wrong? Ye Qian saw that her sister seemed to be a little bit wrong. Brother Mu is such a playboy. I always feel that Fairy Yao Meng staying in his body is a little. Ye Lingxian seemed to want to say something, but she was embarrassed to say it. Ye Qian smiled and shook her head and said, Sister, are you thinking too much? That's a being in the Hedeo realm. If she doesn't want to, can Brother Mu force her to do something bad? Besides, Brother Mu is not that kind of person. Ya Lingxian looked deeply at Ye Qian's pure smile, but couldn't help but recall the scene in front of the reincarnation pool in her mind. Although Fairy Yao Meng did this to reshape her immortal body, the intimate action is still unforgettable. Now that Yao Meng has returned to the Dao, it stands to reason that she no longer needs the spiritual energy in Musian's body. If we infer from this direction, there will probably be no more things happening between Brother Mu and Fairy Yao Meng. Ya Lingxuan's eyes flickered slightly, and she was soon relieved and smiled, "That's right." The next morning, after meditating all night, Ye Qian felt the spiritual energy filling her body, slowly opened her eyes, and went towards Tianhe Garden. She changed into a gorgeous dress, with beautiful patterns embroidered on her complicated dress, and a light blue jacket on the outside. She was only 16 or 17 years old, just the age of a pure girl. Her beautiful dress set off her beautiful face, revealing her innocence. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw Wei Mengru, who had been absorbing spiritual energy in front of the courtyard early in the morning. Seeing her open her eyes, Ye Qian bowed politely and smiled, "Sister Mengru, have you seen Brother Mu?" "He is still in the room," Wei Mengru said calmly, but compared with the coldness when she treated her own young master, her eyes looking at Ye Qian were obviously much softer. "Do you have something to do with him?" Ye Qian shook her head gently, "I have something about the practice that I want to ask my master, and my master should be with Brother Mu." Wei Mengru understood slightly, but did not continue to ask. Although she was Musian's maid, Wei Mengru could not know exactly what Musian did every day, especially since she had just had that kind of intimate relationship with Musian, and now just thinking about her confession at that time makes people feel a burst of fire. If possible, she doesn't want to face Musian for the time being. While Wei Mengru was still lost in thought, Ye Qian was already walking along the path towards the room where Musian lived. At this moment in the room, Musian had just opened his eyes, feeling the wonderful scent of the Tiandan phoenix fruit flowing through his body, which seemed to be mixed with the fragrance of the fairy's skin. He turned his head slightly to look at the face of Fairy Yao Meng. At this moment, there was still a faint blush on the fairy's inviolable and beautiful face. Her snow-white shoulders were slightly exposed under the quilt, and her green skirt was tightly attached to her snow-white skin, pure and beautiful. He gently lifted the quilt, and the extremely seductive figure was perfectly reflected in his vision. Her snow-white skin was stained with a faint silver glow, just like a fairy who had descended from the sky to the mortal world and could not be desecrated by others. Musian looked at Yao Meng with deep respect, and his hands in the quilt began to act dishonestly. Yao Meng slowly opened her eyes, with a faint smile in her eyes, and said in a clear and pleasant voice, "You are getting bolder and bolder." I still remember that when he first met Musian, he only dared to peek at her secretly. Although there was a little desire in his eyes, he would only hide it in his heart. However, now he will put his ideas into action, and become more and more unscrupulous. "I just want to satisfy the fairy sister," Musian answered righteously. Yao Meng glanced at Musian lightly, her expression seemed indifferent, but there was still a trace of uncomfortable shame in her eyes. Although she always wanted to guide Musian as a big sister, in fact, Musian had more experience in bed, she could maintain her indifference, which was the limit. After trying to please Yao Meng for a while, Musian got out of bed contentedly and put on his clothes. Yao Meng propped herself up with one hand, sat on the bed with one leg covered by the quilt, raised her eyes and looked at him with a smile. "Are you worried about being discovered by your Taoist partner? I've never seen you leave in such a hurry before." Musian shook his head and smiled, "It has nothing to do with Ruoxi. I have something to talk to Sister Chiener about." Chiener saw Sister Mengru and him being intimate yesterday. Although Chiener didn't say anything last night, it was probably because Sister Lingxian was by her side at the time. "I still have to have a good talk with her. It would be bad if Sister Qian'er told Sister Lingxian about this later. Although Musian had never seen how terrible the desolate time lock was, he was still a little afraid of the ability to search the enemy in the void from a long distance, fearing that one day he would be locked up in the restricted area by the blackened Ye Lingxian. Yao Meng covered her snow-white body with one hand, tilted her head slightly, and a strand of hair fell down. Qian'er's matter? What happened to her? Musian shook his head and said, nothing, just a little thing dash. Before he finished speaking, the door suddenly opened. Brother Mu dash. Accompanied by a pleasant voice, Musian raised his head almost instantly, just in time to see Ye Qian standing at the door, staring blankly at this scene. In the room was Fairy Yao Meng, who covered her body with one hand, but could not hide her graceful figure, and next to her was Musian, who had just changed his clothes and had not buttoned them. Okay, now it may become a big deal. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 301. To be honest, Musian never thought that Ye Qian would actually see him being intimate with someone else in this way, and the object was Ye Qian's master. After all, he had clearly locked the door at the beginning, so how did Qian'er get in? As a fish pond owner with top Antinic awareness, Musian could not make such a low-level mistake. He did not even lock the door when he was in love with Fairy Yao Meng. But when Ye Qian just entered the door, she pushed it open without any obstacles. Could it be that Sister Mengro did something wrong? I just unlocked the lock. As if guessing the shock in Musian's heart at the moment, a soft voice suddenly came from behind, which successfully attracted Musian's attention. Yao Meng held the quilt with one hand to gently cover her graceful figure. A pair of white jade legs could be vaguely seen under the quilt. There was a faint smile on her cold face. She looked up at Musian, and a charming smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. I knew it when Qian'er entered the villa just now, but think about it, since she will know it sooner or later, why not now? When she said the last sentence, Yao Meng's green eyes moved away from Musian and fell directly on Ye Qian. Ye Qian seemed a little at a loss at the moment, with a look of surprise, covering her mouth tightly, and subconsciously took a half step back. However, in those eyes, apart from surprise, there was no negative emotion such as anger. The saint of Yaoqi Holy Land can feel a person's emotional changes. This is the way of Yaoqi, and Yao Meng is the first generation of saints of Yaoqi. The way of Yaoqi is also created by her. At this moment, Ye Qian's emotional changes are naturally fully included in Yao Meng's eyes. Discovering that her beloved brother Mu and her respected fairy sister were in love in bed last night, this girl with a pure and charming appearance was not angry, nor was she sad. Instead, she had a sense of excitement hidden in her heart, and a kind of jealousy. Two emotions intertwined. On the one hand, she was jealous of the intimacy between brother Mu and master. On the other hand, she couldn't help but get excited because she saw them together. Such a tangled reaction, I'm afraid no one could have thought of it. No wonder she felt that she and Qian'er were very compatible in the past. Is that the case? Yao Meng looked at Ye Qian's beautiful face like white porcelain with a smile in her eyes. Her eyelashes like small brushes trembled. After staring at Musian for a few seconds, she woke up from her confusion and turned around to escape from this place. Musian reacted very quickly and immediately grabbed Ye Qian's white wrist and said, "Qian'er, wait a minute." Ye Qian really stopped the action of originally planning to escape, moved slightly, and looked at Musian with complicated eyes. Her white jade neck showed a graceful arc, and her well-combed hair set off her delicate and pretty pure face. Although she was wearing a light blue jacket outside, it was still difficult to cover the girl's delicate body wrapped in a slim skirt. Under the skirt, a pair of elastic white legs appeared. "Brother Mu, is there anything else?" she lowered her head and asked in a low voice. Her pretty face was flushed, and even her crystal-clear earlobes were slightly hot. Her rosy little mouth was slightly pursed, and she was so embarrassed that she seemed to want to escape immediately. Musian subconsciously glanced at Fairy Yao Meng, who was sitting on the bed behind him, as if saying, "What should I do?" The fact that Ye Qian was willing to stay here meant that she was willing to listen to his explanation, but Ye Qian had just run into him and Sister Meng Ro's matter before, and that matter had not been resolved yet, and now it came again. This is not easy to handle. Yao Meng loosened her hands covering the quilt, and the quilt on her body slipped off. The slightly loose white inner clothes still couldn't hide her proud figure. The slightly messy hair was not at all sloppy, but added a bit of lazy charm that had never been there before. She looked up at Musian and gave him a meaningful look. "You go out first, I'll talk to Qianer alone." Musian was stunned, thinking that if you two talk alone, you really won't fight later. But after thinking about it carefully, he soon felt relieved. Yes, since Yao Meng just let Qianer find out about their affairs, he should have thought of a solution. "I just don't know if the solution is similar to give you 1,000,000 spirit stones, leave him, or the master has taken a fancy to your brother Mu, and he will be your master's wife in the future. If the plot develops in this way, then Qianer will definitely be the protagonist template of 30 years in the East and 30 years in the West. In the future, after the integration of the Tao, she will go to Yaokai alone and take Musian away when Musian and Yao Meng get married, a classic wedding robbery segment. But of course, this is just thinking. Qianer is not such a strong person, she is a pure and beautiful girl with a simple mind." Musian nodded silently and left the room. The master and apprentice looked at each other in the room without saying a word. After a while, Yao Meng raised her slender fingers and tucked a strand of hair that fell on her face behind her ear, smiling and saying, "Let's sit down and talk." In the courtyard. Musian had nothing to do at the moment, and walked around the yard absent-mindedly, then shook his head and sighed. Being too good is really not a good thing. He sighed from the bottom of his heart. Heh. A cold laugh suddenly sounded, and Musian was not surprised. He turned his head to look at the maid sitting in front of the courtyard, looking down at his young master. "Sister Meng Ro, you are here too?" Musian asked in surprise. He naturally noticed Wei Mengru, and the sigh just now was to attract Wei Mengru's attention. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian and said sarcastically, "It seems that Qianer ran into something incredible when she went to find you just now." "It was just a little accident." Musian shook his head and smiled. Although he was a little concerned about what Qianer and Yao Meng talked about, it was obviously unrealistic to eavesdrop on a female emperor in the Hedeo realm. He could only trust Yao Meng for now. Based on his understanding of Yao Meng, the fairy should not do anything to break up the couple. Compared to breaking up the couple, she may enjoy the pleasure brought by the green man more. Musian slightly gathered his thoughts, walked into the courtyard, and sat down beside Wei Mengru under her cold eyes. "Are you okay?" Wei Mengru asked. Musian stared at the tall and cold beauty, with a cold and beautiful face, bright eyes, and a yellow dress that outlined her exquisite and curvy figure. Her eyelashes were like brushes, and her cherry lips seemed to be painted with rouge, rosy and attractive. He suddenly smiled and said, "Sister Mengru is so cold that I am a little doubtful about whether what you said before is still true." Before Wei Mengru could speak, Musian skillfully hugged the slender waist of the maid. To be honest, even a fish pond owner like Musian was not very sure about Wei Mengru's feelings, because the maid knew all his previous bad deeds. In this case, she could still take the initiative to confess. It can only be said that it is true love. Wei Mengru pursed her lips and turned her head slightly to look at Musian. "Do you still have times when you are not confident?" "Under normal circumstances, I won't." Musian sighed softly, "but because it's Sister Mengru, I don't want to lose Sister Mengru." "Have you said this to a few girls before?" Wei Mengru's tone was a bit teasing. "What do you think?" Musian looked at her and asked back. Wei Mengru moved her eyes away unnaturally and said, "Then you can rest assured. No matter my physique or my past promises, I will not leave your side." When she said this, she calmed down a little, raised her eyes lightly, and said, Don't you blame me for telling Ruoxi about our affairs before. Musian shook his head and smiled. Since Ruoxi has already found out, there is nothing we can do. She is a very smart girl and will find out sooner or later. But it is still a pity that you gave her the stockings. In fact, I think you look beautiful whether you wear black or white stockings. Musian took another look at Wei Mengru's plump and slender legs, and felt regretful from the bottom of his heart. He thought that stockings had not been invented in this era, but later he found out that it was not that there were no stockings, but that they were not popular in Dongzhou. Instead, they seemed to be quite popular in Yuzhou. The black stockings of the Yuzhou Empress before were quite eye-catching. But Nirvana silk is not so easy to get. He couldn't ask Yao Meng for this. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian with disdain. Do you like me wearing stockings so much? It's not a question of whether I like it or not, it's mainly because it suits you. Musian refused to admit that he was obsessed with legs. So you don't like it? Wei Mengru tilted her head slightly, with a teasing light flashing in her eyes. Musian shook her head and said, it's not that I like it. At this time, Wei Mengru suddenly said, think about it carefully. Your answer will determine whether you will see me wearing stockings in the future. Well, if I have to say it, I like it, Musian said reservedly. Do you also feel embarrassed sometimes? Wei Mengru's mouth corners slightly raised, and her delicate and cold cheek slowly approached, and gently kissed Musian on the lips. The slightly cool and soft touch came between the lips, and it left immediately, without giving Musian a chance to feel it again. Your question just now, this is my answer. Wei Mengru smiled faintly and said softly. Seeing that Musian seemed to have not recovered yet, Wei Mengru pursed her attractive red lips and continued, you were stunned just by being kissed? This is not your style. Woo. The contemptuous words that were originally intended to be said stopped abruptly. Musian put his hands around her slender waist, leaned forward, and gently kissed Wei Mengru's lips. Wei Mengru finally reacted, her eyes slowly widened, and her eyes gradually moistened, but she still maintained a trace of rationality, and hesitantly transmitted, stop, stop, this is a courtyard, if others see it. Don't blame me for being rude if you mess around again. Don't touch me, aren't you afraid of being seen again? Wei Mengru's transmission gradually became lighter, her face was flushed, and her body gradually softened under Musian's messy palm. Although she didn't like the feeling of being controlled by others, to be honest, she didn't seem to hate it either. The relationship between her and Musian was too special. When she was still a dandy disciple, Musian often showed a look of greed for the maid's body, and at that time, she felt disgusted with this unlearned young master from the bottom of her heart. Although she would protect him on weekdays, she never gave him the opportunity to get close to her. Although he knew how to make progress later, his LSP nature did not change. He even treated her as air and flirted with other girls and said sweet words. Logically speaking, a maid who is as cold as frost and does not allow others to approach her will never have any close contact with such a playboy in her life. But he is not always behind you to protect him. If you really touch the girl behind him, he will risk his life with you. He is really risking his life. So in that thunder tribulation, he fell from the peak of the fourth level of God refining to the beginning of the fourth level. It was at that time that Wei Mengru realized that she liked Musian. She didn't know when she fell in love with him. The martial arts assessment was just a small opportunity. She doesn't have much memory of her past, longs for love but doesn't want others to get close to her. With such a twisted personality, it's probably only Musian who has always liked her from the past to the present. She didn't have much feeling or confidence about her beauty, but in any case, as long as he liked her. Although there seemed to be many girls around Musian now, and the relationship between the maid and the master has just begun. However, it's not too late. After all, Wei Mengru is different from other girls. She has an advantage that no one else has. She is a personal maid. Maybe while they were still fighting, the maid was in the room accepting the young master's request, and she might be stepping on the young master condescendingly while bullying him with contemptuous words. Just like Biruoxi passed by the room that day, and she controlled the young master's life with her legs in the room. It's like now, Biruoxi is practicing in the room, Chiener goes to ask Fairy Yao Meng about her skills, but they are in the courtyard. You are snatching your museum. Anyway, I am the maid next to him. I am so noisy that even if the sky falls, it has nothing to do with me. After a long time, their lips parted, Wei Mengru's eyes were slightly dazed, her mouth breathed out hot air, and her beautiful eyes were moist and filled with hazy mist. Sorry, I couldn't help it, Musian said softly, looking at Wei Mengru who was close at hand. Wei Mengru glanced at him contemptuously and said nothing. Are you angry? Musian asked. You are too reckless. If someone sees you, how are you going to do it with the other person? Wei Mengru's tone was cold. Then, she blinked her beautiful eyes, and the corners of her mouth slightly curved. However, if I say I hate it, I don't hate it at all. Although Musian was quite tempted by the words of the maid, but considering that this was a courtyard rather than a house, he still suppressed the throbbing in his heart. At this time, Wei Mengru seemed to remember something. She looked in the direction of the house where Biruoxi lived and suddenly said, by the way, you may have to prepare for the shielding formation. When refining the spirit and returning to the void, the spiritual energy in the body will be pulled by the thunder tribulation. If the demon cultivator goes through the tribulation in the sect, there will be no escape. Musian raised his eyebrows slightly and immediately understood the meaning of Wei Mengru's words. Are you talking about Ruoxi's identity as the three-tailed fox? Biruoxi is a hybrid of demon cultivator and human. Although the sect has known about this for a long time, and the sect will not mind it, if it is really exposed, it will inevitably affect the reputation of the section. If so, naturally try to hide the matter as much as possible to avoid unnecessary trouble. If so, you really need to prepare in advance. After all, with Biruoxi's current cultivation speed, I am afraid that she will be able to enter the realm of returning to the virtual world in another year and a half. However, how to shield the demonic energy from the return to the void realm? He has no pigs for the time being. Maybe I should ask Yao Meng tonight. When Musian thought of this, he lay sideways on Wei Mengru's beautiful white jade legs that could be broken by blows, feeling the smooth touch that was better than a pillow, and thinking about such things. Having said that, I don't know how Yao Meng's chat with Chiener is going now. He looked at Wei Mengru lowering her head to straighten her messy clothes, and her thoughts slowly drifted into the distance. Meanwhile, on the other side, if Musian is compared to a cake, then Ye Qian at this moment just happened to bump into Yao Meng, who had eaten the cake secretly. Facing the master he respected in the past, Ye Qian's mind was in a mess at this moment, not knowing what to do. How to face the master? Yao Meng, however, seemed quite calm. Her beautiful eyes were gentle, staring at the girl in front of her who seemed to be at a loss. She has a pure and charming face, picturesque eyebrows and bright eyes, her cherry lips are slightly pursed, and her head is lowered, as if she doesn't know how to talk to this noble fairy in the eyes of the world. Finally, Ye Qian plucked up the courage, raised his head and said, Master, Master, if nothing happens, I will go back first. Yao Meng stared at Ye Qian's slender figure, who turned around to leave, and finally spoke. Were you excited when you saw me and your brother Mu together just now? Ye Qian's footsteps almost stopped at that moment, and he slowly turned his head, looking in disbelief at Yao Meng, who had already changed into a green skirt. With a smile in her eyes, Yao Meng came to Ye Qian and gently touched her pretty face. Don't be surprised. The Tao of Yaokai Holy Land can sense a person's emotional changes. Just now I could feel that you were not angry when you saw me and your brother Mu together. Ye Qian's eyes flashed slightly and refused to admit it. You misunderstood, you are a person I respect. I just don't want the relationship between us to be ruined because of Brother Mu. Then close your eyes now. Yao Meng raised her slender hands and covered Ye Qian's eyes. She took a half step forward, leaned down slightly, and whispered in Ye Qian's ear, "Imagine the scene of me kissing your beloved Brother Mu." Almost at that moment, Ye Qian couldn't help imagining that scene in her mind. Her beloved Brother Mu hugged the fairy's waist, lowered his head to kiss her soft lips, and then whispered sweet words in her ear. Ye Qian's heartbeat subconsciously accelerated a few points, and an indescribable excitement surged in her heart, and jealousy. Then, she seemed to realize something, gently pushed Yao Meng's hand away, and when she saw the teasing look in Yao Meng's eyes, she blushed and lowered her head, whispering, "Sure enough, nothing can be hidden from you." Yao Meng's beautiful green eyes revealed a trace of smile, and whispered, "Maybe our compatibility comes from this." When she was trapped in the pilgrimage temple before, because of Ye Qian's arrival, she immediately sensed the extremely high compatibility. Originally thought it was because of affinity, but Yao Meng realized it from the day when she had sex with Musian and awakened some special habits. She and Qian's affinity is not affinity, but cheating and being cheated. You have basically mastered the skills of the pure world Green Lotus. The rest is to practice Taoism with one heart. I have nothing to teach you after this, Yao Meng suddenly said. Upon hearing this, Ye Qian immediately looked up at Yao Meng's cold and beautiful face, as if she wanted to say something. But at this time, Yao Meng's voice suddenly changed, and she said faintly, "But in fact, whether it is practice or other aspects, there are still many things I can teach you. Not only practice, after all, there is more to this world than practice." Yao Meng stared at the girl in front of her who looked extremely pure. She lowered her head slightly and leaned over Ye Qian's ear. Her rosy little mouth opened slightly, and her soft and touching voice sounded lightly in the girl's ear. "Next time, I'll teach you something that has nothing to do with cultivation. I think your brother Mu will be very happy too." Warm Ti. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 302. After waiting in front of the courtyard for nearly half an hour, Musian noticed a wisp of Ye Qian's spiritual energy coming from the depths of the quiet alley behind him. Musian reluctantly got off Wei Mengru's lap, and then turned to look at the girl behind him. Ye Qian noticed Musian's gaze, raised his head and glanced at the young man secretly. He recalled what Yao Meng had just said in his mind, and a trace of shame flashed in his eyes. He buried his head and walked away quickly. "Sister Qian'er." Musian tried to send a message to persuade her to stay. Ye Qian paused for a moment, turned around and glanced at Musian secretly, and whispered, "Sorry, I have something to wait for. If Brother Mu has anything to do, I'll talk about it next time." After saying that, without giving Musian any chance to react, he trotted out of the garden. What did Yao Meng talk to her about? Qian'er did not look very angry, but she always felt that the reaction was a bit strange. Musian was a little uneasy, so he said goodbye to Wei Mengru. "Sister Mengru, I'm going look at what's going on with Yao Meng. I'm a little concerned about some things." It stands to reason that Yao Meng would not be the kind of person who would force his disciples and beat up mandarin ducks, but what exactly did she say to Qian'er? Qian'er's reaction at the moment always feels a bit strange. After leaving the courtyard, Musian walked along a quiet path. After a while, he saw a fairy with snow-white skin in the elegant garden. Yao Meng looked at him with a smile and said with a smile, "You really care about Qian'er's affairs." She paused briefly and continued, "Don't worry, I won't do anything like force Qian'er to leave you. After all, she is also my disciple." "Of course I believe what Sister Xianza said, but what exactly did you say to her?" Qian'er's expression felt a little strange when she left earlier, Musian asked without understanding. Yao Meng glanced at Musian meaningfully and said quietly, "You will know later." She changed the subject lightly and said, "Bizhu is no better than Dong Zhou. The entire Bizhu is controlled by the Queen of the Demon Realm. Now she has annexed the essence of the first Demon Emperor. After refining the essence, Bizhu's strength will be far greater. It's much stronger than it is now. If possible, you should improve your strength as soon as possible so that you can protect yourself after refining the spirit and returning to the void in the future." Sister Fairy said that I will work hard to practice, but you are always in my body, and even if the Queen of the Demon Realm really refines the essence in the future, she won't be able to find me immediately, right? Mu Jian asked doubtfully. This is not like what Yao Meng would say. On the one hand, she will always hide in his natural cauldron until the cauldron is full. On the other hand, no matter how strong the Queen of the Demon Realm is, once there is any movement in Bizhu, even if Dong Zhou is a piece of loose sand, will also take the lead in resisting foreign enemies. What's more, no matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to become a god within a year. The matter of the Queen of the Demon Realm is one reason, and there is another reason. Yao Meng paused, raised his seductive beautiful eyes and looked at Musian, with a faint arc on his seductive red lips. "I also want to see if your natural furnace can evolve again after you refine your spirit and return to the void. If you are greedy for my body, you are greedy for my body." "Why are you so adventurous?" Musian nodded humbly. "I will practice hard and reach the realm of returning to the virtual world as soon as possible to provide enough spiritual energy for Sister Fairy." Yao Meng looked at Musian with a faint smile and said softly, "I'm usually very polite, but when I get to bed, I become unscrupulous." Musian smiled and said, "That's just because Sister Fairy is so charming, so sometimes it's hard to control her desires." He paused and continued, "The first Demon Emperor chose to burn the essence in a desperate fight because of the arrival of the Demon Queen. In the end, he chose to believe Yao Meng. Since the other party said that he didn't say anything strange to Jian'er, he naturally chose to believe it." Yao Meng nodded slightly, "You are right. I think concubine Shangyan probably thinks that if she continues to delay, she may have long nights and dreams. However, I am still a little surprised that she will cooperate with the Queen of the Demon Realm. Are demon cultivators and ordinary cultivators at odds with each other?" Musian naturally knew these things. In Dongzhou, demon cultivators can be said to be beaten by everyone. Similarly, in the demon world, if a cultivator is discovered, it will also cause huge trouble. And in such an environment, the most sacred Liangyi sect in Dongzhou, the mysterious leader in the eyes of the world, secretly cooperated with the Queen of the Demon Realm. If word spread, I'm afraid it would explode. Sister Sect Master. Musian was about to say something. Yao Meng glanced at Musian. With a faint smile in his eyes, Musian understood immediately and changed his words. The sect leader should have cooperated with the Queen of the Demon Realm in order to avoid sacrificing the disciples in the sect, right? Yao Meng nodded with satisfaction. The title sister is enough to call her alone. The sect master is the sect master, so why call her sister? Then, she shook her head and said, "Concubine Shangyan is an absolutely rational person. She should know the consequences of handing over the essence of the first demon emperor to the Queen of the Demon World. Even under such circumstances, it is very strange that she still chooses to cooperate with the Queen of the Demon Realm." Musian took over. In his mind, he recalled the sect master with the black-robed imperial sister. That woman was extremely mysterious from beginning to end. She was the only person Musian could not see through until now. He knew that he was an important chess piece of the sect master. But what the other party did this time was indeed too strange. Allowing the Queen of the Demon Realm to continue to grow stronger will do no good to Dongzhou no matter what she thinks. What on earth does she want to do? Is it just to get rid of the already dying first-generation demon emperor? Or is it to save the lives of the sect disciples as much as possible? There are only two people in the world who can restrain the first-generation demon emperor. One is the Qing Emperor Yao Meng, who directly suppressed the first-generation demon emperor in the past, and the other is the Queen of the Demon Realm. Although the first-generation demon emperor has been sealed away for thousands of years, it can be said to be a terrifying existence in Kyushu in the past. The Queen of the Demon Realm was able to defeat him simply because she happened to restrain the first-generation demon emperor. When the first-generation demon king died, there was no Naja on his hand. If my guess is correct, his Nagia should still be left in the pilgrimage hall. If you have a chance, you can go and take a look. Yao Meng suddenly said casually, there should be a lot of good things in it. The ring left behind by the first demon king? Musian's eyes brightened slightly, and his heart couldn't help but feel a little hotter. You know, that was the former leader of the demon world, and the treasures it left behind. How many treasures of heaven and earth are there? If the natural furnace cauldron is used to refine more heavenly materials and earthly treasures, Ruoxi and the others can be sent to the Return to Void realm as soon as possible. Musian thought about this and suddenly felt a little absent-minded. After chatting with Yao Meng for a few words, he said goodbye to Sister Xianzi and walked towards the small garden where Linglong lived. The Naja left behind by the first demon emperor is definitely a good thing, but now it is absolutely impossible to rashly enter the pilgrimage hall. After all, what happened just now, the people from the law enforcement hall will inevitably seal off the pilgrimage hall temporarily and will not let any disciples step inside. Under normal circumstances, only the head elder can set foot in it. But besides that, there is another way to enter the pilgrimage temple. Lin Ling was lying in front of the table, twisting a white chess piece in his hand, yawning lazily, pressing his plump and straight chest on the table, and resting his heavy weight on the table. She was excellent in terms of figure, personality, and even strength, but Nai could not eat, and her mind was a bit too simple, so even after being with her for such a long time, Musian was still embarrassed to make a move. Of course, the most important thing is that her way is very special and she can detect malice. Musian naturally has no ill intentions towards Miss Lin Ling, but if he exposes his thoughts of gluttonous body, Lin Ling will immediately notice it, which will arouse her resentment. Because of this, Musian never found an opportunity to get closer to her. As he was playing chess by himself out of boredom, Lin Ling suddenly twitched his nose and raised his head to sniff. Roast goose rice. Her eyes lit up slightly and she looked up at the door of the room next to her. As expected, Musian held a plate and pushed open the door. The silver-haired beauty put her slender hands on the skirt of her knees. Although she was full of expectations, she remained reserved and looked at the chessboard. Upon seeing this, Musian apologized sincerely, "I'm sorry, a lot of things happened in the martial arts world before, and they were only resolved today." Lin Ling ignored him. Musian brought the plate to Lin Ling's table and said with a smile, "That's why I put in some effort tonight." Lin Ling glanced at him, and seeing his sincere attitude, her brows relaxed, and she nodded AAA, seeming quite satisfied. Seeing Lin Ling start to move his chopsticks, Musian pondered for a moment and said, "Does Sister Lin Ling know about the first-generation demon emperor?" Lin Ling gently tapped the table with her green fingers, and the words on it appeared, "I know. Today the first-generation demon emperor completely fell." Yao Meng said that the first-generation demon emperor's ring may still be in the pilgrimage hall. "Does Sister Lin Ling think it is safe for me to enter the pilgrimage hall now?" Musian asked. Lin Ling knocked on the table again, "The first-generation demon emperor is dead, so you can rest assured. But the people from the law enforcement hall should have sealed off the pilgrimage hall now. It may be difficult for me to set foot in it." Musian gave a hint intentionally or unintentionally, watching the silver-haired beauty lightly open her red lips and nibbling the roast goose meal. Then he picked up a small piece of goose meat and stuffed it into Musian's mouth. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry." "Sister Lin Ling can just eat," Musian said with a smile. Lin Ling nodded AAA and continued to use the chopsticks. "Sister Lin Ling, what you just said?" Lin Ling wiped her palms with a handkerchief, glanced at Musian, and knocked on the table. You have been busy with the Immortal Ascension Conference recently, and it's so boring to be alone. Sorry, I will have time after the Immortal Ascension Conference is over, Musian said helplessly. If it weren't for the sect master's sister, he wouldn't need to care about the Immortal Ascension Conference at the moment. He might have given up on the competition before even participating. Lin Ling pondered for a moment, and finally nodded slightly and pointed at the table. From now on, you will stay with me every day. Musian nodded, definitely. Lin Ling nodded with satisfaction, groped for a while between her plump breasts, and took out a platinum token. Within the sect, whether they are disciples or elders, the leader and others all have corresponding tokens, and Ling Long is no exception. With her token, you can travel unimpeded no matter where you are in the Aya sect. Musian took the token and asked curiously, is Sister Lin Ling playing chess alone? Lin Ling nodded gently and pointed to the seat opposite her. Does this mean that I should play a game with her? Musian understood and sat down opposite Lin Ling, then picked up the black pieces and started playing chess with Lin Ling. Should we say that Musian is too strong or Lin Ling is too weak? In the middle of the game, Lin Ling's white pieces were surrounded by Musian. AAA. Looking at this terrible scene in front of her, Lin Ling lost the fragrance of the roast goose rice in her hand and fell into deep thought. Then, she gently pointed behind Musian. At the moment when Musian turned around, she quickly reached out and eliminated two of Musian's pieces on the chessboard with a flick of her finger. At this time, Musian had turned his head again and looked at Lin Ling with doubt. Did you say there was something behind me just now? Lin Ling shook her head and said AAA to indicate that it was nothing. Musian was a little confused by this cute little sister Ling Long. He picked up the black piece and was about to place it. Suddenly, as if he noticed something, he froze for a moment. He looked at Lin Ling calmly, picked up the black piece and continued to place it against her. Finally, Musian lost regretfully and sighed from the bottom of his heart, Sister Lin Ling is really amazing. AAA, Lin Ling nodded proudly, and her breasts swayed slightly because of the action of sticking out her chest. Sister Lin Ling is so good at chess. Who taught you? Musian asked again. Lin Ling pointed in the direction of Lianji Peak. Sister Sect Master. But the Sect Master should not be a cheat. Miss Lin Ling should be self-taught, Musian complained in his heart. He then patiently waited for Lin Ling to finish her roast goose rice, and after chatting with her for a while, he stood up and said goodbye. Lin Ling nodded, and there seemed to be something unsatisfied in her eyes. While Musian was seeking help from Lin Ling, at this moment, Lianji sect had reached an unprecedented level of excitement. This time, 3 great masters of Hedao came to Jizhu, and together with the sect master and the Green Emperor, they suppressed the evil creatures in the pilgrimage hall. After that, the Empress of Yizhou decided to watch the Ascension Conference in Lianji sect at the invitation of the sect master, and even held an alchemy competition after that. The maid beside Empress Luo Tan even revealed that the prize for the alchemy competition was an 8th grade elixir, the concentrated spirit pill. Refining the spirit and returning to the void is the lifelong pursuit of countless cultivators, but the thunder tribulation of returning to the void is too difficult, let alone the thunder tribulation, just the process of refining the spirit, few cultivators can do it. The effect of the condensing spirit pill is that it can assist cultivators in refining their spirits, with a success rate of more than 90%. In other words, as long as one's luck is not extremely bad, this condensing spirit pill alone can create an existence in the return to void realm. Not to mention the alchemists, even those cultivators who have never been exposed to alchemy in the past are extremely jealous. This news also spread like crazy throughout the sect last night, attracting the attention of all cultivators. They did not think that the news was false. After all, the maid probably got the instruction of the Empress, so she intentionally revealed this news. The Ascension Conference with 3 imperial-level medicinal herbs as prizes, and the alchemy competition after that, the heat brought by the two also pushed the Ascension Conference to an unprecedented height. Now there are countless eyes in Zhuzhou staring at the Lianji sect. At this moment, in front of the pilgrimage hall, the Empress Luo Tan, wearing a white dress with gold thread, stepped on knee-high snow-white boots. Her pair of black silk legs outlined the perfect lines of plumpness and slenderness under the white dress. She looked down at everything in the pilgrimage hall. Shang Yanfei is really a strange woman. Should I say that she is too confident in herself, or that she believes that the queen of the demon realm has no interest in the territory of Dongzhou? It is really bold to give away the essence of the first generation of the demon king for free. The maid beside him looked down at the pilgrimage hall, which was completely blocked by the law enforcement hall at this moment, and guessed, the leader of the Lianji sect seems to be able to deduce the secrets of heaven. Maybe he has calculated something. Maybe. Luo Tan smiled with his lips pursed, looking at the black-robed boy who wanted to enter the pilgrimage hall but was blocked by the law enforcement hall, and chuckled, it seems that there are still many smart people. Although the first generation of the Demon King is dead, there may be some good things left by the first generation of the Demon King in the pilgrimage hall. Knowing that the evil things in the pilgrimage hall are the cultivators of the first generation of the Demon King, they will naturally want to go in and find out. However, the current law enforcement hall is naturally impossible for anyone to enter. The maid took a look and said, that person seems to be Yayu, an inner disciple of Ziwimengpeak, with great talent and an alchemist. Luo Tan said lightly, and didn't seem to be very interested. Alchemists are naturally very sensitive to spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy in their bodies is bound to be mixed with some herbal smell. Just one look at Yayu can tell that he is an alchemist, and his talent is quite amazing. It seems that he doesn't have a very good thinking ability, the Empress said softly. At this moment, Yayu was arguing with the people of the law enforcement hall in front of the pilgrimage hall. He was full of resentment in his heart. Looking at the female cultivator of the law enforcement hall, he said in a deep voice, "Senior sister, when I went to the pilgrimage hall before, I accidentally left my ring in the pilgrimage hall. I hope you can make some concessions. If you take a closer look, you will find that the senior sister is the senior sister of Kang Haifeng, and Lingyu, who had a relationship with Muzian in the past. She is the granddaughter of the master of the law enforcement hall, and is also one of the monks responsible for blocking the pilgrimage hall. At this moment, she naturally sternly refuses the sect disciples who plan to step into it. Sorry, but for the safety of junior brother I can't let you in, and Lingyu said with a smile. You seemed to want to say something more, raised his head and said, but senior sister. And Lingyu said warmly, junior brother, the sect has ordered that no one is allowed to enter the pilgrimage hall during this period. If you break in without permission, you and I will be severely punished. Junior brother, please go back. Obviously knowing that there are good things in the pilgrimage hall, but the law enforcement hall is not allowed to enter, looking at Lingyu, who is not allowed to enter, Yayu's face is a little unhappy, and he looks at Lingyu and her side again. Although the disciples of the law enforcement hall were unwilling to do so, they finally had no choice but to turn around and leave. Since the law enforcement hall refused to give in, they had to find another way. Yayu naturally didn't know that when he was confronting the people of the law enforcement hall, in a certain air court, his various performances were watched by the Empress of Yuzhou. The maid on the side said, this Yayu is very talented, but he doesn't seem to understand the world. He was so arrogant when he left just now. Luo Tan smiled and didn't care about it, just thinking about concubine Shang Yan's motives. During this period, a few more people wanted to enter the pilgrimage hall, but they were all driven away by the law enforcement hall. After a while, Luo Tan seemed to be tired of the scene here and was about to leave. At this time, out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly glanced at the young monk on the ground who had just arrived at the pilgrimage hall. It was the little monk who had a special aura that night. He seemed to be an old acquaintance with An Lingyu. He was chatting with the senior sister, showing a spring-like smile from time to time. The atmosphere seemed quite good. The maid took a look and said, "This person seems to understand the ways of the world, and he has a good relationship with the senior sister, but no matter how good the relationship is, it is impossible to let him in." As he said that, he couldn't help but look at Musian again. The clothes are good, and she is very good looking. I have never seen such a beautiful skin even in Yuzhou. If she were placed among women, she could already be described as beautiful to the country. At this time, it seemed that Musian mentioned that he wanted to enter the pilgrimage hall. The smile on An Lingyu's face slowly faded, and then he shook his head helplessly and rejected Musian. Seeing this scene, Luo Tan smiled faintly, "I'm going back. This Musian has more emotional intelligence than other monks, and you will feel much more comfortable getting along with him, but that's all." It seems that King Di's previous performance was really not an act. I originally thought that Qing Emperor tried his best to show that he was not interested in Musian, but now it seems that Qing Emperor really has no interest in Musian, and decided to teach him personally just to repay his kindness. As for being able to obtain the water of reincarnation, it was probably because he happened to have a close relationship with the saint in the forbidden area and pleased the saint in the forbidden area. After all, no matter how talented the restricted area saint is, she is just a girl of no more than 17. Thinking of this, Luo Tan was about to turn around and leave, when the maid beside her bowed slightly and followed her. At this time, as if he suddenly noticed something, Luo Tan looked sideways and saw Musian taking out a sect token from his arms. The sect token was white gold with a silver dragon engraved on it, which looked lifelike. Luo Tan didn't know much about the Liangyi sect, but he also knew that the tokens in the sect were roughly divided into 5 categories: the disciples' sect tokens, the special law enforcement tokens of the law enforcement hall, and the elders, the first 4 types of tokens. The 5th type of token is the most special. There is only one token, and only one person in the entire sect holds this token. Seeing this token is like seeing the sect leader. Even the elders have to bow when they see this token. How come the spirit dragon's token is with him? Luo Tan's eyes flashed slightly, and he looked doubtfully at the token in Musian's hand. "Owner." The maid paused and looked up at the Empress, only to see her standing condescendingly in front of the air pavilion, looking down in the direction of Musian. After a while, the corners of his mouth formed a faint arc. "Don't worry, let's see again." King Di, sure enough, he was hiding something. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 303. This place is really eerie. Why didn't I feel it last time I came here? Musian looked around, feeling the biting cold hitting his body, and couldn't help rubbing his arms with both hands. This place was originally used to seal the cave of the first generation of demon emperors. It was just that Yao Meng was there at that time, so it didn't look so eerie. Now that the first generation of demon emperors are dead and Yao Meng is not here, this place seems a bit eerie. Musian calmed down and strode into the depths of the hall. The hall was extremely empty. The first generation of demon emperors were sealed here in the past, but now the vines that sealed them have completely withered. Musian looked around and felt a slight discomfort filling his body. Demon spirit. The whole hall is filled with the demon spirit of the first generation of demon emperors. Most cultivators cannot survive in the demon world, and the reason for this is that ordinary cultivators cannot absorb the demon spirit into their cauldrons. It can be said that he is worthy of being the former ruler of the demon world. Even though he has completely fallen, the demonic energy is still so strong. Musian used his spiritual sense to scan the hall, but he did not find the ring left by the first generation of Demon King. If it were an ordinary person, he would have given up by now, but he has a pseudo-physique of a natural spirit body. Although it is not as good as Ye Lingxian, it can also play a role at this moment. Musian did not give up. He closed his eyes silently and felt the demonic energy around him. What surprised him was that the demonic energy that cultivators could not absorb at all was like ordinary spiritual energy to him, which could be absorbed by Musian into the natural furnace. And in the demonic energy that was everywhere, Musian finally caught a trace of a special item that was different from the demonic energy. He slowly opened his eyes and turned to walk out of the hall. There was a sculpture on each side of the hall, and next to the sculpture, there was a purple withered flower. Musian raised his hand and injected a ray of spiritual energy. The withered purple flower seemed to be moistened and quietly bloomed. A monstrous demonic aura rose into the sky, and the purple flower turned into a purple flower ring. The ring left by the first generation of Demon King was placed next to the sculpture so openly. If it wasn't for the natural spirit body, who would have thought of it? I hope you won't let me down. For you, I wasted my time with Ruoxi today. Musian put away the ring left by the first generation of Demon King for the time being, and turned to leave the ancient hall. In the sky attic, the maid looked straight at Musian and said softly, "He came out." Empress Luotan looked calmly at Musian, who had just left the cave. Her bright eyes were clear and moving, her hair was lifted in the wind, and a pair of slender black silk legs were faintly visible under the white skirt interwoven with gold threads. Although she has a stunning face, her eyes reveal a majesty that makes people dare not look directly at her. "Do you want him to come to see you tomorrow?" asked the maid. Luotan pondered for a moment and said calmly, "The Ascension Conference will start the day after tomorrow. The disciples who have taken the martial arts assessment will return tomorrow. If it is tomorrow, it will be too late. You should invite him to see me tonight." Tianhe Garden. After returning to the villa, Musian went straight into his room. Then, he took out the ring he had just received from the pilgrimage temple not long ago. "I hope the first generation of Demon King will not let me down too much. Now that the Ascension Conference is imminent, if I can get some power from this ring, I can also keep my chastity. If I can't open the ring, I can only ask Sister Mengro to wear black silk to comfort me tonight." Musian muttered and put the deep purple ring on his finger. Then, a wisp of spiritual energy was injected. Whoosh! Almost at that moment, the ring emitted a strong light. Musian felt as if there was a monstrous demonic aura coming towards him. The ancient text poured into his brain, making Musian feel as if he was about to faint. Then, the picture suddenly changed, and the whole sky was burning. Under the burning sky, a phoenix burning with black flames made a sharp cry, and the ancient text in Musian's mind also emerged clearly. The text that was originally difficult to decipher was clearly imprinted in Musian's mind at this moment, and he realized what was written on it almost immediately. Heavenly Phoenix Art. This should be the first grade art left by the first generation of demon emperors. Is there nothing else in this ring? Musian used his spiritual consciousness to search the ring for a while, but unfortunately, there was only this art in the ring, nothing else. The first generation of demon emperors is much poorer than I thought. Musian complained in his heart. Apart from a first-grade technique for demon cultivators, there were no good things like elixirs. But if you think about it carefully, it is true. The first-generation demon emperor was sealed in the pilgrimage hall for such a long time. Even if there were many elixirs at the beginning, the spiritual energy of most of the elixirs would have almost disappeared after 100 years. As for those emperor-level medicinal materials, most of them cannot be carried on the body and need to be raised in a specific environment. When the first-generation demon emperor wanted to capture Dongzhou, he probably didn't expect that he would never come back. Musian closed his eyes and observed the description of the Tianhuang technique again. Soon, he had a new understanding of the first-generation demon emperor in his heart. The Tianhuang Gongfa, in a sense, is similar to the Tiandan phoenix juice he licked on Yao Men yesterday. The Tianhuang Gongfa allows practitioners to burn their own cauldrons when their spiritual energy is exhausted, and be reborn from the fire. When practiced to the extreme, they can even be reborn 9 times. And if the Tiandan Phoenix fruit is taken, this Tianhuang Gongfa can even complete further evolution. No wonder the first generation of demon emperors chose the Yaokai Holy Land as the first destination for conquering Dongzhou. One of his purposes for conquering Dongzhou was probably for the Tiandan Phoenix fruit in the Yaokai Holy Land. However, he probably didn't expect that the way practiced by the Empress of the Yaokai Holy Land was actually the sealing method. Once the pure world green lotus appeared, no one in the same realm could stop it. It can be called a bug among bugs. Musian slightly restrained his thoughts and raised his hand to cover the light of the ring. I can practice this heavenly phoenix art, but I can't expose it unless it's absolutely necessary. Although it's a demon cultivation art, it can improve my strength anyway. Except for the existence of the demon queen who has her own racial advantage, only Yao Meng has the ability to restrain the first generation of demon king. If I practice the heavenly phoenix art in the future, the only thing I need to worry about is the demon queen. The demon queen's body is a giant python that can devour everything. The heavenly phoenix art can burn the cauldron to regroup the spiritual energy in an instant, but the demon queen can devour the essence of the practitioners of the heavenly phoenix art when they are seriously injured. In this way, the heavenly phoenix art will be useless. As for Yao Meng's pure world green lotus, Musian is not very afraid. Although the fairy restrains the heavenly phoenix art, she can't restrain Musian. If he wants, he can raise his hand to suppress a mere fairy tonight. Of course, it may take 2 hands to do it, and 1 hand is not enough to control her. After all, her heart is still very big. Thinking of the charming look of the pure and lustful fairy on the bed, Musian felt a surge of heat in his heart, and even had the urge to find the fairy to practice the 8 desolate dream map right now. However, the Immortal Ascension Conference is imminent, and compared to the 8 desolate dream map, it is still possible to improve his strength bit by bit. After Musian put away the ring containing the Tianhuang Gongfa, he got up and planned to concentrate on practicing in Bairuoxi's room. At this time, there was a slight knock on the door outside the house, and then Wei Mengru's cold and indifferent voice sounded outside the house. "There is your letter." "My letter? Can't the other party come to me directly if he has something to do?" Musian raised his head and said, "Come in first, Sister Mengru." The candle light flickered in the room, and Musian took the letter handed by Wei Mengru, opened it and took a rough look. It was an invitation letter written by the maid next to the Yuzhou Empress. The Empress seemed to be called Luo Tan, and she is a top-grade alchemist. Musian thought of the beautiful woman in a white dress he saw that day, and then read the contents of the invitation letter carefully. Reading the end, Musian's eyes were thoughtful, and he noticed the gaze of Wei Mengru beside him, turned his head and said, "The invitation letter from Yuzhou." Wei Mengru glanced at Musian casually. "The other party should not know that you are a natural furnace. Why would they invite you? The so-called geniuses, these great powers of Hedao must have seen a lot from the past to the present. Except for Ye Lingxian and Bairuoxi, who are geniuses, most of the geniuses are definitely not taken seriously by the great powers." However, the other party actually asked the maid next to him to write a letter to invite Musian. It is really incredible. I don't know if it was affected by the original witch or what. When looking at Musian, Wei Mengru's eyes could not help but stay on his face. For a moment, the beautiful eyes that used to be proud seemed to have a little more confusion. She quickly came to her senses, secretly shook her head to dispel those messy thoughts, and asked in a cold tone, "Are you going?" Musian slowly put away the invitation letter and smiled. "Since the other party invited me, of course I have to go. There will be an alchemy competition after this. To be honest, I am quite interested in the prizes. Maybe I can bribe the referee in advance. In the future, Bairuoxi's thunder tribulation and the demonic energy under the thunder tribulation when refining the spirit and returning to the void will not be completely concealed even by the formation of Tianhe Garden, but if there is a spirit condensing pill, there will be no such trouble. Moreover, if she gets the spirit condensing pill, she will have more than 90% confidence that she can safely enter the returning to the void. Do you think that you can let the other party give you the prize of the alchemy competition by going there? Wei Mengru raised her eyebrows slightly. Of course it's impossible. No matter what, the other party will definitely follow the rules. Musian paused, glanced at the maid's jade-like smooth legs, and said absent-mindedly, but there will always be a way. If it was before, he would not have too many thoughts even if he was with Wei Mengru in private. However, since Wei Mengru took the initiative that day, Musian slowly activated some of his hidden special hobbies. In addition, after kissing Wei Mengru today, he was not up or down, so he naturally had some bold ideas at this moment. Wei Mengru seemed to have noticed Musian's eyes. She pursed her bright lips, then raised her eyebrows slightly, and a trace of contempt appeared in her eyes. Don't you have anything else to do except thinking about these things all day long? If you had focused on cultivation before, you would have at least reached the level of the 6th level of spiritual cultivation now, right? I have been practicing hard since I left Tianqian City. I think these things are force majeure now. Musian spread his hands helplessly. Wei Mengru glanced at him. What force majeure? Because you are here, it is force majeure. Musian smiled. Sister Mengru has such charm. She was obviously just lustful, but Musian said it so pure and elegant, and even touched the girl's heartstrings. Even Wei Mengru was silent for a while, not knowing how to respond. Although Musian's praise was indeed sincere. Among the girls in Musian's fish pond, Wei Mengru is the best in terms of leg lines and white skin. Musian has definitely felt this under Wei Mengru's lap today. Seeing that the maid remained silent, Musian was about to speak, when a disciple's voice suddenly came from the jade slip hanging on Wei Mengru's waist. Junior Sister Wei, Master asked you to go and get the spirit stones and elixirs for the next half-month. This is the communication jade slip of Huabao Peak. Because of the enlightenment of the instrument spirit, as long as the two are not far apart, they can communicate. The disciple of Huabao Peak who spoke is probably outside Tianhe Garden now. But it stands to reason that Wei Mengru just received elixirs and spirit stones a few days ago. It's not the time yet, but she has been given another one. Huabao Peak really values you. Sister Mengru is worthy of being a genius in the section. Musian smiled and teased. Aware of the teasing look in the boy's eyes and the eyes that scanned back and forth on her body, Wei Mengru glanced at Musian with a trace of contempt between her eyebrows. Then, as if she had thought of something interesting, her lips curled up slightly, a smile of joy flashed across her beautiful eyes, and she responded softly, I still have some things to deal with here. Senior sister, go back first, I will go to Huabao Peak by myself later. The senior sister outside the villa was obviously stunned for a moment, and continued, do you need help? No need. Wei Mengru's lips curled up slightly, and she glanced at the young master who was teasing her next to her. Her green fingertips slowly moved up along the smooth and tender white jade legs, and finally, her fingertips gently hooked on the hem of her skirt. Aware of Musian's fiery eyes that were attracted to her at that moment, Wei Mengru, or the maid lady under the influence of the original witch, curled her lips slightly, and her fingertips slightly hooked a corner of the hem of her skirt, staring at him seductively. It's just a bug, it's a quick thing. What do you think, young master?